There's never been a time like this. I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel, but go home and go home in peace.
All right. I am Ben Burgess. I'm joined by our producer, Forrest Miller. This is Give Them an Argument. In not very many minutes, we are going to be talking to Thaddeus Russell, who's, among other things, the author of The Renegade History of the United States. And later in the episode, going to be chatting with the great Anna Kasparian. No David Griscom this week. He's traveling. But our friend Vic Viana stepping in for an alternative music segment to substitute for the one that we usually do. So that should be fun. And also later on, going to play part of the interview that's coming out for patrons on Thursday with Dasha from Red Scare. But the voice you just heard, of course, was President Trump. I guess don't think that counts as condemning what happened on Wednesday.
No, somewhere between inciting and condemning, I think.
Yeah, no, that's right.
That line.
That's right. Yeah, walking a tightrope between inciting and condemning. I think that's exactly right. That he's saying that they should go home, but he's also letting them know that they're very special and he loves them, which is a hell of a way to talk to people rioting in the Capitol.
I don't know how Don Jr. felt about that. I think that's more affection than he's ever gotten from his dad.
Yeah, that seems right. Yeah, Don Jr. Yeah, like Ivanka has gotten that, from Donald, but Don Jr. and Eric definitely not. No question. So yeah, and he's talking there, of course, to people who were rioting in the Capitol as part of a disorganized and I think we have to say fairly half-assed, but also a violent attempt to intimidate Congress into not certifying the results of the election. And I think we're going to be talking to Anna about this later in the episode, about how to kind of walk the line between acknowledging that this is extremely disturbing, right? That this should not be minimized. It's an insane thing that this happened. There are precedents for it, but it's also a crazy escalation past those precedents. Like, nobody died during the Brooks Brothers riot in 2000, with Bush v. Gore. So it is it's an insane thing that happened, and it's certainly like a huge indictment, of Trump, obviously, that he was, at the very least, I think we could say, talking out of both sides of his mouth about this. But it's also something that I think, at the same time that you don't want to minimize it, you want to recognize that it is this huge, crazy escalation of what's happened before. I think we also want to be careful about erring in the other direction, especially because the idea that, however many people, I know there were tens of thousands of people at the original rally. I think the estimates I've seen for how many people were in the Capitol, I don't know what you'd see for us, but I've seen estimates ranging from like several hundred to a couple thousand.
Yeah, that's about what I've seen. I think 2,000 was probably the max that I saw. I mean, it's hard to really gauge that, I guess, because it's not like someone was going around
Yeah.
tallying up everybody they saw. But
Right. Yeah, but that sounds about right. And so,
and not all 2,000 by any means made it into any of the federal buildings. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely a lot of people that showed up at the Capitol that didn't necessarily push their way in, didn't break windows, didn't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So I guess this is the thing about that we are talking, and there are there are retired police and military who are in the mob. There are some people who are still those things, who are in the mob. They're obviously their off hours, but we are talking about a fairly small, by the standards of these things, fairly small, mostly civilian mob of fantasists. I think you can say that, like people who are like, QAnon, lunatics, who spend like their version of way too much time online, and who thought that they could do this thing that they clearly had no power to do, and managed to get a few of themselves killed, and I think 2 cops killed. Like I know there was one initially, but I think one has died since then.
I think one cop was killed by the mob or involved, like by something involved in the mob. The other cop committed suicide, from what I heard.
Oh, okay. All right. So they managed to kill one cop and a few of themselves in various ways. One of them, with a with a taser that he clearly had not gotten the taser safety instructions down. But also there was a woman who was shot by the cops, and I do tend to think that, like, I think both things are true, that it was like the whole thing was a crazy underreaction by the Capitol cops, that given the level of force that they're routinely willing to show for like Code Pink protesters and disabled people,
any leftist protesters, any Black Lives Matter protesters would not have gotten that nice treatment from the restraint from the Capitol Police.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think you could say overall it was a severe underreaction, although probably in the moment with the woman who was shot, that's an overreaction. She wasn't armed. I'm sure they could have, stopped her without doing that. But I think having let this mob into the Capitol, and then they started to freak out that they could actually get into the room where, the congressmen, senators were, and could start killing people. So I think they probably overreacted in the moment. But whatever, the point is that this sort of somewhere between several hundred and a couple thousand deranged QAnon fantasists, basically doing like exactly like Civil War reenactors, but with live ammunition, like it's that level of detachment from reality. It's bad. It's a huge moral indictment of Trump and all of these right-wing, demagogues who've whipped them up. But it's not actually a threat to the basic institutions of, what we politely call American democracy.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah. And I don't think there was ever, I think there was a chance they could have killed more people for sure, but I don't think there was ever a chance that they could have done anything that would have led to like an actual like coup against the United States government or anything like that. And the reason I think it's important to make that distinction is not just that there's a lot of it's not just a matter of the sort of weird debates that people have online about exactly which word you use to describe as a riot or an insurrection or whatever. I think the more important thing is that what you think this, like, without minimizing how bad it was, what you think the scale of the threat was is going to say something about what you think about everything that's coming down the pipeline in response.
Yeah.
So Biden has already said that a major priority for him is going to be some new law against domestic terrorism, because God knows the terrorism laws that we have in place right now aren't, repressive and scary enough. And there's been a lot of and there's been a lot of tech censorship in ways that it's not that some of these people, like whatever, clearly couldn't have happened to nicer people, right? Some of the people it happens to are like the worst people in the world, but there is, I think, legitimate grounds for worrying about precedents that are being set, about the kind of assertion of power by the tech companies. And I think that when we do get those new domestic terrorism laws, then I think that could escalate all of that to another level. And on that point, I pre-recorded last week a interview with Brian Atinsky, who has what I think is just like a useful little cautionary tale from Israeli politics about this exact thing. All right, I'm now joined by Brian Atinsky, who I asked to do this because he said something interesting the other day on social media that I thought was very relevant here. So Brian, do you want to just quickly say who you are?
Yes, hi, I'm Brian Atinsky. I could say I'm a dual citizen. I'm a anti-Zionist citizen of Israel and an American. And for many years, I was an activist and a journalist in Palestine, Israel. And so I had seen your post regarding like how we need to take what happened at the Capitol very seriously. And but we also have to be very careful about how we contextualize and frame what happened, who these people are, and what needs to be done in the future. Because if we're too based on our emotionality and knee-jerk reaction, we can call for things and frame it in a way that can lead to a backlash against the left and immigrants, minorities.
Yeah. So the example that you gave was about the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. For anybody who's watching it, who might not be really know about this. This is a while ago at this point. There was still supposedly sort of is this peace process that's theoretically supposed to lead to some sort of two-state resolution to the Israeli Palestinian conflict. But there was one that people actually took seriously in the 90s and thought might really lead to something. And the Israeli Prime Minister who was most associated with that push, Yitzhak Rabin, was assassinated by a right-wing terrorist, for being involved in that, for in the mind of this terrorist, being willing to give up Israeli land to create some sort of future Palestinian state. And what you said was about kind of the fallout from what happened as a result of that.
Yes, yeah. In I think May of '95, they passed the Oslo Accords 2, which then set up the Palestinian Authority and the ABC zones, and it would be a 5-year interim agreement that would be tiered, and then every certain amount of time there would be an expansion of Palestinian right, our sovereignty, or quote unquote, and then would lead to a final status negotiation. Was supposed to be in 1999. There was a lot of backlash, from the the Israeli right, and there was an increase in violent actions by the Palestinians who are still under occupation and were under occupation at the time. And actually, during the time of Rabin, he increased settlement. There was a settlement increase larger than any time in Israel's history. So at the same time he was agreeing to these negotiations, he was increasing settlement so he could create facts on the ground. Anyways, the point is that there was a lot of backlash from right wing, and there was a lot of demonstrations. And in these demonstrations, people, some of these right wing demonstrators had posters. So it's showing. I showed you a couple that were like showing Rabin wearing a keffiyeh, Arab headdress, I guess you call it, and saying he's a boged, a traitor, or a, you know. But then at the bottom it says a call for elections. I mean, so like it's calling for elections. It's not incitement, and or showing him as a Nazi. Now we could say, like, you know, that's not really, you know, appropriate, quote unquote, but incitement, no, definitely not. But after the Yigal Amir assassinated Rabin, there was a movement by liberal Israelis, mostly liberal politicians and the citizenry, who saw all these, like, posters, demonstrations, and stuff, and said that those posters themselves were a form of incitement that led to his assassination, ignoring the fact that there were direct calls of incitement. Yigal Amir went to different rabbis and literally asked them for a halachic or a Jewish legal approval to assassinate him on the grounds that he was an enemy of the Jewish people for giving up Jewish land and blah blah blah. So anyway, so on the one, that's the thing. They focused more. I say there's smoke and fire. They focused on the smoke, which was the posters, and kind of ignored the fire of direct calls for incitement among secular nationalists and religious nationalists. So in the couple of years following that, there was this call, and then it was a push, and then there was an expansion of the definition of incitement. Now, come a few years later, I was one of the co-founding members of the Independent Media Center of Israel, Indie Media Israel, which is an open publishing system for activists. It was set up by a group of Israeli activists, including me, and it actually, we opened we started the website for the Prague World Trade the World Bank IMF protests, which I was at, which started on the 27th of September in 2000. And then by 2000, by the next day, Ariel Sharon went to the Temple Mount and started the Intifada, second Intifada, by pissing all the Palestinians off. So we went from like about, a couple hundred hits a day to tens of thousands of people trying to see what was going on, because we were the only organization that had people on the ground everywhere, and they were uploading videos and interviews and texts and photos about what was happening at the beginning of the Intifada. We had Al Jazeera and CNN calling to us to ask for, like, video footage and stuff. So it got the Israeli government very freaked out. And so there were a lot of settlers, a lot of right wing, that were watching our website for anything. And we knew that. And anyway, so come this guy, there's a political cartoonist, still does a lot of work, named Carlos Lattouf. And he published over a few weeks. He had published other things too, but over these few weeks, he published a cartoon of Ariel Sharon, the prime minister at the time, kissing Adolf Hitler. Now, is that in good taste? I don't know. We can ask. Is that incitement? No, definitely. It's saying Hitler was violent. Ariel Sharon is violent. Violence is bad. I mean, he should go to The Hague. I mean, calling for someone to go to The Hague is not incitement. Anyway, so I didn't even see this. Literally, it was on the front page of the website, because we had like when people publish, and then there's room for 10 articles. Then it goes off and it goes into the archive. I mean, and if you looked at it, I checked it out. It was like 5 minutes. It was on the front page, and then it was in the archive. But there's people watching it. They saw it. I didn't even see it. All of a sudden, I got a call the next day from a friend who said in the front page of Idiot Achronot, which is the largest Israeli newspaper, that the Indie Media Israel was under investigation for incitement due to this cartoon, which they and Jerusalem Post published a photo, of the cartoon. Are they inciting? It's ridiculous. They literally showed it and said, like, this is incitement, and they did that, but okay, here it is. So what is it? Are you insane? So it's ridiculous, and they knew it was, but they, under the new definition, I was, so I said, oh, okay. Because if you understand the context, this had happened like 20 times when the police had, called us in. There were some cases where someone doxed some general, and we immediately removed it. They knew that, like, after the fact. And let me throw my phone. It's being called. The end result was that the next day I was sleeping. It was 5 a.m. I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden I hear, "Get up, Brian." And I'm like, and I look above, and there are 3 burly men standing above me, not wearing uniforms. They were wearing Israeli police uniforms. I'd be freaked out, but 3 months before that, there was bomb threats.
You'd be freaked out, but you would be freaked out in a different way. Like, like people like burly guys you don't know, telling you to get up and wearing civilian clothes. You think like you're about to be
thought I was about to be killed. I literally, 3 months before that, there was bomb threats against me. I had to change my phone number. So I thought this was them coming to kill me. So anyways, it doesn't matter. I was under 8 hours of interrogation. Israel has a lovely rule that you're not allowed a lawyer while you're being interrogated. They also say, while they were giving me my quote unquote Miranda rights, they do say, like, you have the right to remain, in Hebrew, but you have the right to remain silent. Anything you can say will be held against you. But they also added, and if you don't speak, that will also be held against you. That's part of it. They added, and then you're not there. And then they didn't bring up the part about the lawyer present. I'm like, what about a lawyer present? And they're like, no, this is in America. You don't get to, because I guess under British law, which, British mandate, and then don't allow that. So it's kind of British law.
Another one of the lovely consequences of British colonialism that 100 years later, we're still suffering from. But, I remember, by the way, I don't remember who said this, but that the greatest contribution made to the spread of freedom in the world by America might not be the Bill of Rights, but Starsky and Hutch reruns to, give people around the world that they have a right to ask for a lawyer present, when they're interrogated by the cops.
Oh yeah, I just thought that was common. Yeah. And I'd been arrested literally over 100 times doing my work as a journalist, but that was for like 5 hours. And then they're just like, because the way it works, like, you're in a demonstration in the West Bank, and they literally have these phone printers, and they get a printout from the army base saying that it's a closed military zone, and they'll show it to you, and they'll say, but it says from 5 minutes ago, you can't be here. And then it's like, well, but there's Palestinians that are harvesting olives. And they goes, no, you have to go. So they arrest you for 5 minutes. So I was used to that, but not anyway. So they used this new rule or new definition of incitement to investigate me for 5 years. This went on. I was called back and back again to the police, and so I just think this is a lesson where, we can call for, we see what the right is doing, and then we can say, we don't like that. Let's do something to stop them from their ability to do that. And as you said, guaranteed that will be used against us much more than them. I was just
about that.
There was, literally, while that happened to me, it's just, you can see how, like, if you're a left wing, that's used against you. Avigdor Lieberman, he's the head of Yisrael Beitenu, which is one of the Israeli, farthest right nationalist movements.
Literally, as I understand it, advocate the deportation of all Arabs, including citizens, from the country.
Yeah, he would be for that. Anyway, so he literally said in 2015 that Arab citizens who are not loyal to the state of Israel should have their heads chopped off with an axe. So, I mean, those who, quote, those who are with us deserve everything, but those who are against us deserve to have their heads chopped off with an axe. So, like, I mean, if anything, that is a call for incitement. Was anything done about that? No. Why? Because he's...
Yeah, I mean the people that these things are going to be used most against are the people who the enforcers of the rules like the least. And if you start from the premise that the people who are in charge of society right now, don't like us and what we stand for, which if you don't, I don't understand what you think the left is. Then that seems like a given. Of course, it's mostly going to be used against us, and maybe the version of that in America in 2021, after we have whatever kind of god awful Patriot Act Part 2 that ends up getting passed as a result of this, that says it's about domestic terrorism. That I'm sure anybody who people are going to be able to say is Antifa or whatever, like that's going to be what it's going to be used against, at least as much as, probably much more than the far right. So I think that's a useful cautionary tale. Just want to share that with viewers. Thank you so much, Brian.
No, definitely. You're welcome, and yes, have a good day.
All right, you too.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's Brian Atinsky, formerly of Indie Media Israel, now living in the United States, or whatever else you can say. At least you can have a lawyer present when you're being interrogated.
Terrifying, just terrifying that Israel is seen as, by a lot of people that aren't necessarily paying attention to the facts on the ground. Israel is seen as kind of one of the most liberal democracies if you take away the whole Palestinian rights part. So it's terrifying that their security state is
and again, like, this is and of course, like, many aspects of that are obviously predate anything that Brian is talking about. Having even Arab citizens of Israel, never mind Palestinians, the West Bank and Gaza, treated as, third or fourth class citizens, obviously goes back a long way. But that specific stuff he's talking about that was used against them was pushed for by Israeli liberals to crack down on right-wing incitement after the Rabin assassination. So we're thinking about, along similar lines, I will say that the episode 23 for patrons, the Thursday episode, is going to be an interview with Dasha from Red Scare about a lot of much bigger issues about their podcast and how she feels about the left and the things we agree and disagree on, but also about a lot of this free speech stuff because the Red Scare Twitter account was deplatformed recently, apparently as part of some big sweep, along obviously with lots of far right accounts that were deplatformed after the Capitol riots. And
that's always how it goes. There's always a big sweep up of both left and right accounts, or I guess post left, as she would probably consider themselves.
Yeah, she expressed some ambivalence about the left. We actually got pretty deep in the interview into what she agreed with and what she didn't agree with, about what hopelessly earnest commies like me think. But in any case, so we'll probably play a little bit of that later on. I will say, if you want to have access to the whole thing, to the episode we did last week with Gene Bajalan, the Beginner's Guide to the Kurdish Liberation Struggle, and every other patron bonus episode, just head over to patreon.com/Ben Burgess. That's for the monthly cost of a milkshake at a 50s nostalgia diner in 1994. Never going to get sick of that joke. You can get access to all of that stuff and the Discord and the regularly scheduled Discord office hours group voice chats. So do that if you possibly can, if you like the work that we're doing here and you want to support it. and you get all that good stuff as a gesture of gratitude. Meanwhile, though, I want to bring on Thaddeus Russell, who is, among other things, the author of a book called The Renegade History of the United States. He is the host of the Unregistered podcast, does and coordinates lots of online teaching outside of the university system at Renegade University calls it, and is somebody who I thought would be interesting to have on for a few reasons. One of which is that I know that he's somebody who has a critique of socialism, and of course that's part of what I want to talk about today. But I think one of the things that's most interesting about Thaddeus is that, unlike the vast majority of people who have such a critique, he very deeply knows what he's talking about. This is this is something. When I was talking to him over the weekend, we were sort of getting into and comparing notes about, like, he has really deep personal and family roots on the socialist left, has spent a lot of time thinking about about labor history and radical history in the United States. So if he disagrees, at least that he's not disagreeing just on the basis of like having watched Red Dawn a couple times too many. So welcome, Thaddeus.
I've never seen Red Dawn, but thanks for having me on.
Fair enough. The original is fun in a campy and ridiculous kind of way. I don't know that the remake has much going for it.
Wolverines, right? Isn't that what they say?
Yeah. That's why.
That's all I knew about it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so I remember I listened to an interview with you a few years ago on something called the Nostalgia Trap, and I've much more recently I went back, when because people had suggested you as a guest. I was looking into your stuff, and I remember him talking about it, but I hadn't listened to any of this at the time. I listened to your two conversations with Michael Brooks, one of them on one of them on your podcast, and one of them was like a webinar at Renegade University. And I think if like whatever else you want to say about any of that, like those are just really good conversations. Those are fun to listen to if you're if you're interested in this stuff, like so I think that so yeah, I thought it would be really good to have you on. But do you want to just start off by going in a little bit into what I was teasing earlier about your your personal backstory with the socialist left?
Yeah, but not nearly as deeply as you and I talked about. Was it last night, 2 nights ago?
Yeah. We don't have time to go that deep. But, like,
how many hours did we spend talking about various Trotskyist sects? We did not talk about Trotskyist sex, which I think is grossly appreciated. There was Trotskyist sex, just not enough of it. That's why I left socialism. No, my parents were Trotskyists. I was born into a family in Berkeley in the mid 1960s. They were members at that time when I was born. I think they were members at that point of Young People's Socialist League, YPSL, which some people on the left know about. And then that pretty quickly became the IS, the International Socialists. And so I was born and raised a socialist in Berkeley in the 60s and 70s. And my parents stayed in the movement, and they were so committed to the movement that they industrialized. They got jobs, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know about this concept. Got jobs as proletarians. My stepfather was a steel worker and then a truck driver. And my mother was a clerical worker, and they were organizing the working class for the revolution. And that didn't work out. And so in the late 70s, they left the movement and got bourgeois jobs, more or less. And they've since then been sort of just like Bernie-ish, MSNBC type, kind of establishment liberals, social left liberal types. But that was me.
Still with some kind of commitment to socialism, if only in a sort of distant theoretical way.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, they don't really talk about it that much, but there's certainly. All I know is that they refer to Democrats by their first name, which is sort of
that's a bad.
I don't want. Yeah, it's that bad. I don't even want to go there. So
Yeah,
Um,
one thing I will say that really hits me about that story is that in the 70s there were so many of these jobs as steel workers and stuff around that it was just there for the
Right.
taking if you wanted to.
You could just go get a job as a steel worker. Nowadays, like, millennials are like, wow, you could get a job as a steel worker. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, he was a truck driver for many years for Safeway, and he was organizing for the Teamsters, or really, he was organizing within the Teamsters against the Teamsters. He co-founded what became Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Some people might know about that. Then it was called Teamsters for a Democratic Contract. But yeah, he was. This is my
Yeah,
stuff.
if you've seen The Irishman, that would be the other side.
I've heard. Yeah, right. I've heard.
Yeah.
So and that's one of many reasons why I ended up writing my dissertation on Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters. Is sort of how I found out about it, and then I found out that no labor historian really had written any serious study of either the Teamsters or Hoffa, and I thought that was an odd lacuna. So I went about it and was told that I shouldn't do that at the Tamiment Library. Some archivist there said, there's more interesting things to write about with the Teamsters, like the dissident faction within. And I said, yeah, I know my stepfather founded it. And actually, I think it's more interesting to talk about the stuff that no one's paid attention to, is the fact that the Teamsters is the biggest union in the history of the United States. And there's no scholarly work on it so far, which is fairly outrageous. So I try to fill that hole.
Yeah, I literally founded it, right? Like at the Teamsters for a Decent Contract. That was the original name.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think you were saying, that was like literally like started at a meeting at like your family's kitchen table.
Yep. The newspaper was called The Fifth Wheel, and they used to lay it out on our kitchen table in the little hovel we lived in Berkeley. And then in like 1970, that would have been like probably mid 70s, 74, 75, somewhere around there. I could get you the exact date. Actually, it might have been a little bit earlier, because it was around the time the Teamsters were fighting with the UFW, the farm workers. And that was really what he was involved in, was trying to get the Teamsters to take the so-called good side on the side of the UFW. But this is all very like
So
deep inside baseball stuff. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But as far as your trajectory out of all that,
Right.
So I remember that you said so when you were writing that thesis about the Teamsters, or at some point over the course of that research, you decided that like one of the lessons of this history from your perspective was that exclusive representation, which is something that labor is often fought for, is actually a bad thing for workers.
Yeah, right. So the question I had was, why was Jimmy Hoffa so militant, so aggressive, and so good at getting contracts, and therefore consequently very popular among his membership? I think most labor historians would agree that he was the most popular labor leader in the United States, at least among the membership, the rank and file. Now, that's not to say there weren't factions like my stepfather's factions, which were, highly anti-Hoffa, but he was wildly popular. And I interviewed a lot of Teamsters, ex-Teamsters, who were in their 70s and 80s, and they just adored him because mostly he got the contract. So that was the question I went into the study with, and I found out that the reason was that Jimmy was constantly in competition with other unions at that time in the 30s and 40s. It was mostly, not entirely, but mostly CIO unions, so sort of the famous left liberal unions that there were many books written about. Because in trucking touches every other industry pretty much, right? And so those industries at that time were being rapidly unionized by these very aggressive CIO unions. And so if the warehousemen are controlled by one union, they're a threat to the truckers union as well. And so Hoffa was forced to get good contracts to win these members against the competition. And so what ended up happening was I discovered sort of this market argument, or this market mechanism within labor history that I found to be good for the rank and file, good for the working class generally, at least good for union members. And this was not okay. It was not okay at all to say this, because of course we must have one big union, for the big revolution. This is what my parents were fighting for. And if you have unions and the working class divided in this way, not just divided, but actually competing, rivalrous, that will never come to pass. You'll never get the IWW's one big union idea, or really, this is what socialism is predicated on. You got to have, an organized working class that's centralized ultimately. So I said, well, sorry, I'm going to write this anyway. And they couldn't make heads or tails of it. And it was attacked, I wouldn't say viciously, but it was certainly attacked in the New York Times, Washington Post, and sort of some of the academic journals at the time. My advisors, who was the sort of very They were all well known. This is at Columbia. Eric Foner was there. Joshua Freeman, some people might know who that is. Good left labor historian. Nelson Lichtenstein, one of the most important labor historians of the time, who was also a comrade of my parents. They just couldn't stand the politics of it, and they said, "Well, if this is about markets, And I said, "Well, yeah." And they said, "Well, what have markets done for people lately, for the working class lately?" And I said, "Well, that's sort of not really relevant. Why are we having this discussion?" Because I thought I proved my point pretty well. So it didn't go over very well, and that was really the beginning of my exit from the left. Although there were a lot of reasons for my exit from the left, but that was certainly one of them. And I'm actually no longer really interested in labor at all. I was, when you're a Marxist, as I was, and a socialist, as I was, and you're in graduate school in history, you kind of have to do labor history. It was almost a requirement back then. Back in the 80s and 90s, that's what most people were doing. And I just found even that was bankrupt ideologically and intellectually. So we can talk about that, but I mean, there are actually sort of deeper, more interesting reasons for why
I want to get into this. I was actually just going to ask you, because I'm curious if, I know you said you weren't that interested in it at this point, but if you've read Sean Richman wrote a book called Tell the Bosses That We're Coming, that's is okay. So it's an attempt to sort of rethink like what counts as a union, like what we think of as a unionized workplace, as a union contract, to kind of try to figure out like what's been working and what's not. And Sean is somebody who's still very much a socialist, but I think there might be an interesting convergence about some of the exclusive representation stuff. But I do want to get into your deeper, more interesting reasons. So I think that my understanding is that you're not like necessarily a libertarian in the sense that some of the people that I'll have on the show to argue with are libertarians. That you don't have some sort of vision in your head of of what, like, how society should work, where we have well, we can probably just stop the sentence there, right?
That's really important. That's extremely important, right? I mean, for someone to not have a utopia, right, is a very important part of one's politics, right? And that's exactly right about me. But continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Okay. So yeah, I think that's important to be clear on. That so it's not, I think, that you have like this kind of deep in principle objection to having public anything under any circumstances. But you do have, but you are hostile to socialism. You have. I think it would be fair to say, in terms of day-to-day politics, even if there's no like utopia as the lodestar for the whole thing, some fairly libertarian impulses, Okay, so let's get into the deeper reasons. Just like on a basic level. So if I say I'm a socialist because I want to have a society where people's people's basic needs are guaranteed, and nobody has to worry about, and I could list off a bunch of things that we have to worry about in the kind of society that we have right now. And I think that it's unreasonable, it's unfair that people don't have control over this huge part of their lives that happens at the workplace. That most people in most circumstances, some of us can become petty bourgeois podcasters and whatnot, but most people don't realistically have any alternative most of the time, except for to go to work for others and and submitting to them, and that seems like an unreasonable restriction on autonomy. So for all of those reasons, if I told you, and I would, I mean, this is obviously the short version, but I mean, this is more or less what I would say, that that I'm a socialist. I don't necessarily have. I mean, I'm certainly more utopian than you are, because I do have some fairly specific ideas about how society can be reorganized from the way it is right now. Although I'd also make a distinction between thinking that being a utopian in the sense of here's the amazing way that things could work that would solve every problem that we have right now, and here's something that seems achievable that would solve a whole lot of problems that matter to me a lot, even though some would remain, and whatever. But why shouldn't I be? Like, what's wrong with what I just said?
Oh, nothing at all. I mean, so the only question I would have, Ben, is, am I included in the socialist republic that you want to build?
Yeah, I mean, by
Oh.
definition, not surely.
Okay, so that's all that matters. So if I'm not included, you go have a blast, buddy. You go do your socialism wherever you want it to be. If you're leaving me alone, then I am not hostile to socialism whatsoever. In fact, I would welcome a socialist secession. When California threatened to break off after Trump was elected in 2016, I thought, let's go. Let's do the Green New Deal all the way in California and see how that goes. I mean that. Let's see how that works out. Now, if I'm included, first of all, I didn't give you permission to include me. So already we're in trouble.
No, I mean, like, I think then we're in trouble with any possible form of social organization, you know, because none of us, you know, get to decide, you know, what kind of society we're going to be born into. There are always going to be some kind of rules of the road that regulate how that society works. And, you know, I hope if we have a decent society that we can all have some meaningful level of democratic input, but we're certainly not going to get individual veto power over what the basic ground rules are. I don't know how that would work in any society, capitalist, socialist, feudal, whatever. Okay. But so here, I think there are ways that you could be left out of it, and there are ways that you can't be left out of it. So let's see if we can bore down a little bit, right? So ways that that you could potentially be left out of it is if we still had, you know, if we did the sorts of things that I think, you know, I'm actually working on a book with Bhaskar Sankara and Mike Beggs about this, arrogantly entitled The Blueprint. In that, you figure might as well just own it. So if you think, look, we could take some things outside of the market entirely. Certainly things like healthcare and, you know, and education that I would want, you know, we can get into this, but I would certainly want those things outside of the market. And, you know, we could maybe have state ownership of what are sometimes called the commanding heights of the economy. And if we do still, have a private sector, and I think there are reasons. I'm less moved than you are by the in principle reasons, but I think there are reasons why you might still need to do that. Then at least we can have that be dominated by worker cooperatives. But look, if you have if you want to be, you know, like if you want to be some sort of extremely small business person, then I think there is a sense in which you could be left out. Now, there is also a sense, I want to be honest about this, that you couldn't be left out, which is that if nothing else, you would have to be taxed quite a bit, to pay for all that stuff that we started with. So, are you objecting to being included in that sense?
Oh yeah, I object to all of it. Well, I don't object. I just won't do it. So this is exactly the conversation I had with the late great Michael Brooks. In fact, on my show, you may have heard this. I said, Michael, you can have a socialist republic, but I'm not going to work for it. I'm not going to participate in it. I'm not going to co-manage society. I'm not going to go to any meetings. And as far as I understand it, as someone who was not just born a Trotskyist, but was, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America into my 30s. Okay, I've done this. I've been there. I've read the stuff. I taught Capital at Columbia. This is not just petulance here. This is an actual theoretical critique but it comes through in a different way that most people don't hear, which is, what are you going to do, man? What are you going to do to me? Right? As I understand it, socialism, it requires participation by everyone, or at least almost everyone, for it to be socialism. Otherwise, it looks like the Soviet Union, and I know you don't want that. And I know a lot of socialists don't want that because, again, I was born a Trotskyist, so I know the difference between Stalinism and sort of what's called democratic socialism. They were called democratic Leninists, by the way, which is a funny idea. But anyway, we can get into that later. You're going to need me to participate, to go to some meetings, and I hate meetings. I've been to so many, having been a socialist. I've been to so many meetings, and I'm sure as hell not going to do any work for some socialist republic. I'm not going to do work for any republic. I'm an anti-nationalist. I'm opposed to borders. You know, I don't like the whole thing. I don't want to work for some government, no matter what it is, no matter who's running it. So again, it's on you guys. Like, I'm not proposing some new model, some blueprint for society. So, you know, but you guys are, and I'm telling you, I love you guys. I do. I love you guys. You're like family, literally, pretty much. But what are you going to do to me? How are you going to make? I'm not going to work for you. I'm not going to.
Let's see if we can break some of that down.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
So I think that when it comes to, you know, you said you talk capital, so of course you know that one thing that's not in capital is any of what Marx calls in one of the introductions recipes for the cook shops of the future,
Right?
You know, which is obviously
there's no socialism. There's no socialism.
Yeah. There's no description of socialism in capital. Which I actually think is a mistake. I think if you're going to get people to, I understand Marx's reasons for that, but I actually think if you're going to get people to take something seriously, you do need to, at some point, you know, spell out, you know, how it would work, especially if there are historical examples that aren't positive, like you alluded to. But look, would you have to go to meetings? Well. If you're self-employed, then no. If you worked at a cooperative, maybe. If we look at actually existing cooperatives, like the Mondragon Corporation in Spain, I think that they do require attendance at like an annual general assembly where they elect management. But you do basically elect management, and you know you aren't. You aren't at constant meetings. I'm with you, by the way. I hate meetings. Like I'm not I think. That's actually my criticism of some suggestions that, you know, suggestions that have been made for how socialism works, you know, like participatory economics, that it sounds like way too many meetings with, you know, to me. So fair enough. Yeah. But also I question that link even in general between economic democracy and having to engage in civic participation if you don't want to. So we already have, in a very incomplete form, we already have political democracy, and nobody forces you to go to local meetings, even if you live in one of those New England towns where they still have town meetings. I don't think anybody forces you to go to those. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the force is coming in here, unless it's a condition of a specific job. But then, except with paying taxes. But I know that when you presumably when you say you're not going to do it, you don't really mean you're not going to pay taxes, because presumably you already do that in the society that we're living in, and those taxes go to things that you would quite rightly find much more objectionable, like droning weddings in Pakistan.
Oh, well, I mean, so you're going to need cops, though. So my tax money is going to go to cops, because
there are good. So yeah, I'm not gonna make the claim that's not going to do anything to anything that you don't like. I'm very skeptical that you can have a society without some form of security forces. I'm not a police abolitionist. I think that police should be certainly dramatically reformed and demilitarized, from the kind of policing that exists right now. I think there are lots of things that we send like armed first responders to now that you could certainly send unarmed first responders to.
Right.
But I do think that you are probably in just about any society, certainly any society that we could realistically imagine anytime soon, you are going to have some sort of mechanism for enforcing laws. If I know our mutual friend, Dave Smith, will tell you that under he does have a utopia, and in that utopia, that I guess those would be private cops. Enforcing laws, because there wouldn't be any public ones. That one sounds a lot worse to me. But whether it's public or private, you are going to have something. I don't see a way around that. So, you would presumably have to have taxes, that would pay, if you are a police abolitionist, maybe in that example, for some stuff that you don't like. maybe you'd even be libertarian enough that you'd object to paying taxes to pay for other people's health care. But I guess one maybe fundamental difference between us is that as a restriction of freedom, if that's the issue, then I think that saying that some of the money in my bank account is going to be taken away so that other people can have health care, and they can go to college, and they can have a place to live and all of that stuff, which seems like, okay, so that's a violation, I guess, of my freedom to spend every penny that I'd otherwise get pre-tax with government minted currency and complex economic arrangements that I'm very skeptical could exist without a government. But that's a restriction of my freedom to spend every penny of that how I want. But I'm a lot less worried about that than I am about other kinds of unfreedom that you get with arbitrary domination of some people than others in workplaces. And I'll just give you one small social democratic example, and then you can tell me why I'm wrong about it. Okay. So it seems to me like there's a book called The Nordic Way of Everything by a journalist named Aru Parantin or something. Anyway, some name like that. Who is a Finnish writer, came to the United States, and she describes when she came to the United States being shocked by what seemed to her almost like pre-modern forms of dependency, in the way that workers wouldn't want to quit even jobs that they hated because they were worried about losing their health insurance, that people would stay in bad marriages, sometimes even abusive marriages, sometimes for the same reason. They couldn't lose the health insurance, or in a second example, that the relationship between parents and children who are going to college, that the children are a lot more dependent on their parents as young adults, because the parents can cut off their college tuition. And it seems to me that having these things guaranteed by the state, in that sense, like that's a kind of freedom that speaks to me a lot more than my freedom to spend every penny in my bank account how I wish. But you don't see it that way.
Well, okay. So first of all, it sounds like you're laying out the Corey Robin argument, right? That socialism provides economic freedom, freedom from want, which is really Franklin Roosevelt's idea, right? The freedom from want speech back in 1930 something. No, see, you're not getting it. I don't have a principled objection to socialism. I'm telling you, I won't do it. So, and
well, you won't do what?
Well, I won't do it, Ben, unless you have cops, right? I won't pay.
What's the it?
Well, I won't pay anything. I won't pay taxes.
Taxes. Okay, very good.
But that's what we started with, right? So you have to have cops otherwise I'm not going to pay any taxes for you, for your socialist republic. Okay, so that means you're going to have cops with guns and the threat of violence, the threat of putting me in a cage, right? Or killing me. That's got to be there.
But you could say the same thing about just having property, that if you have that for one person to own a building, that another person can't be a squatter in, you have to have some sort of implicit threat of violence, right? So I mean, if I said, hey, I'm not going to recognize, your property rights over that building, I'm not going to do it. How are you going to make me do it, Thad? I'm not going to do it. It seems to me that we can have the parallel argument, which goes to the point about how all societies have rules, right? It's just it's a question of how they're made, whose interests they're in, all of that stuff. But there are going to, at some point, I'm very skeptical, and I would assume as a non-utopian, you join me in my skepticism that you're ever going to have a society without coercion. The question is just which rules we want to coercively enforce.
So it's coercive for me to stop someone from stealing my shit with violence. Is that coercive?
Well, the question is whether and in what sense it's your shit. So the distinction that I would make is that when you say, like, surely nobody means, right? Like people who really are, utopian libertarians, who say that that aggression, is never justified. Well, what counts as aggression depends on who should have what, and the should is really important because if it's a question of who legally is entitled to what, well, the IRS is legally entitled to that portion of of your income. So there's no, then like the whole objection to taxation on these grounds, would just be self-defeating. So it seems like it has to be a normative thing that and similarly, if I mean, look, if I take if I steal your TV, right, then presumably you don't think that it's coercive in a bad sense to come take it back from me because it's rightfully yours. So I think the question is, what is rightfully yours and what's not rightfully yours, and that seems like at that point we're arguing about theories of economic justice. What we think a morally right distribution should be, which is terrain that I'm much happier on.
Yeah, exactly. So this is why you should have a different guest on, because I'm non-normative, Ben. I've been trying to explain this for half an hour now, right? Like, I don't care. Like, if you want to go, I just said this, I said it earlier, if you want to go have a socialist republic, go have a blast, go do it. I don't care if you're asking me what my preference is, which is that's the only question I have for myself. That's the question I have for myself is, which do I prefer? Do I prefer going to 27 meetings to plan what stoplights are installed on which streets and who picks up the stray dogs and what the foreign policy of the republic will be and how many cops we have and what the I mean, real socialism, right? Real deal socialism, real economic democracy is exhausting. And we've all known this. Anybody who's like participated in any organization that is at all democratic, including businesses, right, that operate democratically in some sense, it's just nonstop work, and I'm just not going to do it. So do I prefer to have property rights as Western society has constructed them, which I absolutely see how they constructed them, I think I do, because it sounds like the alternative is your cops are going to come steal my shit. So I prefer to just have what I have now.
Well, hold on. If if we're not comparing socialism to some sort of libertarian utopia, because you don't have a utopia, you're non-normative. Then what we're presumably talking about is right now, what we have right now versus socialism. And so the question, look, if the only force that we're talking about is that you're forced to pay taxes. Hey, you're forced to pay taxes right now. So what the preference can't be about whether police exist or taxation exists or anything like that, because those things already exist. So if you don't want to call it if you don't want to call it normative, you're just expressing your personal likes and dislikes. Preference. Then okay, so those personal likes and dislikes don't seem like they can be about the actual existence of taxes or police, because if they're about the existence of taxes or police, then it seems like what you're really doing is not just expressing a non-preference for socialism, you're expressing a preference for some sort of libertarian utopia of the kind that I thought you didn't have. No. So you're going to have to bleep this out because I'll get arrested. So I cheat the IRS as much as I can, right? As any sane person I would think would do, I cheat and lie as much as possible to pay them as little as possible. Okay. And so I'm not talking about a utopia. My political agenda vis-a-vis the IRS is to pay them even less, right? I want to pay them even less. And ideally, I'd like to pay them nothing ever again. So there you are. I mean, again, you're going to have to do something. That ideally almost sounded like we were sneaking in a utopia under the wire, because like your actual preference would be for a radically different society with no taxation at all.
I mean, abolishing the IRS, but again, this is just for me. Like, I know some people love the IRS. I've met a few in captivity, people who actually like the IRS, but I don't. So again, I don't need the IRS to be abolished. I just need it to be abolished in my life. No, I mean it. Do you understand, right? This is actually a fairly penetrating critique I think I'm making of socialism. In other words, I am not the only one you're going to have to deal with, right?
Well, the penetrating critique is that taxes would still exist. Taxes wouldn't stop existing in society.
Let me try to flesh this out, okay? Sure. So the critique I'm making here in a joking way
Yeah.
is that I realized among many problems with socialism, well, there's many for me. One is just the amount of work. And I'm not kidding you, honest to God. Like when I realized what it really meant, and after I'd been in comrades meetings that lasted 10, 12, 16 hours, and I studied the history of left and everybody talked about, and this was just running some little tiny sectarian organization of Trotskyists, right? Try running a city or a country or the world, which is what socialism ultimately is. Everybody's got to work nonstop. So cancel all your fun. Hold on, wait a second. And then what I'm getting at here is that underlying the whole project is a whole system of violence. You've got to do mean. You and I are friends. I like you. You're a nice guy. Like I want to work with you. And that's cool. And none of it. But the fact is, your politics requires you to do very, very mean things to me.
Well, I mean, if you prefer,
Does it not?
If your preferences include, as you say, Western property rights as they've been constructed, etc., then your preferences include a system of violence to enforce those property rights. There's no property rights without violence to enforce property rights.
Yeah.
But as far as the work thing, I don't think that I think we could have representative democratic institutions, without forcing people to go to meetings. But that's one thing. But as far as work goes, I think there is some overlap where we can have a conversation here because, hey, sure, fair enough. Fun is good. Having to work all the time is bad. No argument from me on either of those points. But it seems okay. So
I was going to say, just quick interjection.
Sure,
okay?
sure. Yeah, I like that. That's a little leftover academic hat at the finger for a question that's not a full hand raise. But yeah, go for it.
Peace, man. Okay, here we go.
Okay, yeah, I just had one finger.
I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead. No, I know. Fun. No, you said you liked fun.
Yes.
So listen, the history of socialism, right? The history of socialism and fun is not a pretty one. Socialists have been officially anti-fun since the get-go, until they moved to Brooklyn and became 30-year-old millennial guys. But when they were real, no, I'm dead serious here. Like,
I know you're serious. I think it flattened some stuff, but make your point.
Tell me a socialist who has embraced fun.
Tell me a socialist who's embraced fun. I think that. Well, look, I'll give you two historical examples that I think you'll agree are not minor examples or deep cuts. Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. Frederick Engels was referred to, I think, by his son-in-law in letters as the great beheader of champagne bottles. He at one point, he seemed to be living in a menage a trois with two sisters. I think. Karl Marx, read letters by people who used to go bar hopping in London with Karl Marx. I think those guys liked fun. I'm not really aware of anywhere in their writings that I've read, at least.
Let me clarify my question.
Sure.
I meant, of course, they've all had fun and done things that were, well, I hope, God forbid, but then again, I'm talking about their politics, right? Publicly, what their position was on fun. It's always been negative. Always been.
So what?
Wait. Socialism and Puritanism, right, have been like this. They've loved each other. They love each other. Lenin and Trotsky were famously opposed to homosexuality, not because it was gross or dirty, but because it was bourgeois and decadent.
Well,
decadent. Because it was decadent.
Homosexuality was legalized in the Russian Revolution. It was only recriminalized by Stalin. So I don't know about that specific example. They also legalized abortion. They also made it a lot easier to get a divorce than it ever had been before. So I'm not sure about the sexual puritanism of the Russian Revolution.
Lenin called it decadence.
Okay.
Decadence.
Oh,
well, no.
Okay.
Well, let's hold on just a second. So that word decadence, right?
Yeah.
It crops up in all kinds of socialist writing. If you just Google that, Google any great socialist thinker and then put the word decadence next to it, you're going to find just scathing polemics about bourgeois decadence, which is all about fun, pop culture, right? Is that correct?
I don't know. I mean, if you have places where Karl Marx and Frederick Engels took a break from their criticisms of a family life and all that stuff to say that it was that it was wrong or bourgeois decadence to drink or sleep around or any of those things. Then I'm not aware of those. I'll be fascinated to hear them. If you can find them, then I'll say, oh, okay, well, that's something they got wrong. But
wait,
as far as because there's another point we want to get to here. So if you want people to be able to work less and have more fun, then it seems to me that for one thing, that if we just look at not the sort of getting past capitalism entirely in the ways that as somebody who does have utopian preferences, I'd like to, but if we even just look at actually existing social democracy, it seems like there have been big advances there because of both strong labor unions and social democratic regulations on how much you can make people work. As you know from your knowledge of the history of the labor movement, limiting work hours was a major victory of the labor movement. If you look at other countries, with more militant labor unions, with more social democratic regulations, then it seems to me that some of them have given people a lot more free time than we have. So actually, this is just a minute, so just indulge me here. Forrest, if you have that, so there's the Super Bowl ad that I was thinking of from 2014. This is a Cadillac ad from the 2014 Super Bowl. It's just a minute long.
Why do we work so hard? For what? For this? For stuff? Other countries work, they stroll home, they stop by the cafe, they take August off. Why aren't you like that? Why aren't we like that? Because we're crazy, driven, hardworking believers, that's why. Those other countries think we're nuts. Whatever. Were the Wright brothers insane? Bill Gates, Les Paul, Ali. Were we nuts when we pointed to the moon? That's right. We went up there, you know what we got? Bored. So we left. Got a car up there, left the keys in it. Do you know why? Because we're the only ones going back up there. That's why. But I digress. It's pretty simple. You work hard, you create your own luck, and you gotta believe anything is possible. As for all the stuff, that's the upside of only taking 2 weeks off in August. That's fun.
So yeah, the pitch is you could be like, hey, a decadent European with all those social democratic regulations, giving people all that time off, or you could be like us, like Americans, who like to work and are driven. Although, of course, most people are not given an option on that. It's not really. I think that Americans are demanding that they have less time to spend with their families and spend more time to spend at work. It seems to me that has something to do with the balance of power between labor and capital in society. So you see this differently.
Okay, so last time I checked, all the countries in Europe that you're a fan of are capitalist countries, right? And that's where their wealth was generated. That's why they can afford these very extravagant social welfare programs, is because countries like Sweden and Norway have had very robust capitalist economies, right, to pay for it with. So why they work so much less than Americans do, and that ad is completely correct. It's a very accurate representation of American thinking about work, which, if you know anything about me, my book is one extended critique of the Puritan, here it is, Puritan work ethic, right? Which many people know essentially was what this country was founded upon, was Puritanism, and in particular, its work ethic, which has a very uneasy relationship with capitalism, because capitalism does two things simultaneously. Daniel Bell taught us in Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism. It makes us work like dogs. I hate that part of capitalism, that half of the productive side, right? To be a worker or a manager requires tons of work and discipline and obedience to the clock, all these things I hate. But it simultaneously produces all these things that gratify our basest desires. Hedonism comes flying out of capitalism at the very same time that we are made into little drone ants, worker bees, right? So why do Americans work so much more than Germans and Dutch and Swedes? Why does that commercial run in the United States? Because I think of our Puritanism, not because of our capitalism. There are many other capitalist countries. Some of them are even more purely capitalistic than we are, but they work far fewer hours. It's because we have this ridiculous belief that goes all the way back in our history, and you'll see it in every speech by every politician except for Donald Trump. No kidding, that work is wonderful, and that is what defines this country. I ask everyone to go look at Barack Obama's 2008 inaugural address, in which that is the theme of that speech, is how Americans have always adhered to the Puritan work ethic, and that's why we're so great. And you know who we included in the list of Americans who adhered to the Puritan work ethic? Slaves, for God's sake. I mean, the nerve of these people. But that's what's at the base of American culture, and that's what set it apart from Europeans for centuries. That's why Europeans have made fun of Americans.
But
because
okay,
we work so much harder, because we believe it's a good in itself, no matter what we get for it.
yeah. So I mean, I would say that it is striking though that it hasn't been for centuries that people have had all that time off, being mocked in that commercial. Those are recent developments. It's not it's not like social democracy, just sort of comes, emerges out of this, right? This is the reason that people have to work fewer hours is because of stronger labor unions, stronger government regulations on how much you can make people, on how much you can make people work. Now, it's true that, as you say, these are still capitalist countries so most people, work for regular, externally owned, private businesses. That's absolutely true. But I would say that once you have implemented parts of, what I would like within that, then you get these benefits, like having to have a shorter work week with no reduction in standard of living. In fact, I would argue that in a future society where we went further, I think that those European social democratic first steps are beautiful first steps. I think that I would have both ideological and practical reasons to want to not stay there. The ideological reason is the one that we've been talking about the what my preference, if you want to talk that way, for having a society where most people don't have to go to work for others and submit themselves to the rule of others with no democratic input. And that's the ideological reason. The practical reason is that I'm worried that if you maintain this basic division of society into a working class and a capitalist class, then those reforms are going to be unstable. That there's going to be a permanent danger of them being rolled back. But look, you're right. We do need something to produce all of that wealth to be taxed to have everything that I like. What I would argue, though, is that if we look at actually existing worker cooperatives, that we could have a private sector that was dominated by those, and we could continue to produce that wealth. And if the downside is that people would have to very occasionally go to meetings, I think nobody at Mondragon, is just for working there, has to go to, monthly or even, weekly or even monthly meetings. I think that General Assembly, where they pick management and go and approve the plan, for the year, the operating agreement, I believe is an annual thing. But look, okay, you have to go to a meeting once a year. It's
once a year. What kind of socialism is that? Once a year?
I'm just describing what actually exists in the world's largest worker cooperative.
Oh, Mondragon? You're talking about the current Mondragon.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the 1930s Mondragon, the workers' collectives then, right? That the anarchists and the communists imposed, right? And everyone should go look at the great book. It's called Workers Against Work. I forget the name of the author. But he wrote the history of this in Spain in the 1930s. Once they established these workers' collectives, these cooperatives, once they took over the factories, they became cops, right? The workers themselves became cops, and they actually worked more, and they started talking about the glory of labor and the dignity of labor and how great it was that they were working. And it became this whole police action to keep the workers disciplined, just like the capitalist bosses were doing before. The number of working hours is determined it's not because of labor unions. It's determined by the market. The reason we work.
Okay.
Wait, let me finish the thought. Ben. I just got started here. Okay.
Fair enough.
the reason that we work so much more in this country is that Americans are willing to work more than the French are, than the Dutch are, than the Swedes are. So essentially, Americans are always scabbing on others, right? If workers volunteer to work overtime for no pay, which I submit is more common in this country than in other countries, right? Then the worker then say goodbye to your weekend. That's the reason we work more. It has nothing to do with the unions. And in fact, wait, one last thing. I've written the history of this. I've actually written the history of this. So this is in my book as well. So the reason we have shorter work hours historically in this country goes back to the 19th century, as all your listeners will know, you'll assume it's the unions and the socialists of the 19th century. It's actually not true at all. What happened in the 19th century was we had all these people who came in from the country, essentially peasants, to work in the first factories, and then immigrants who came from the country and other countries who didn't know what a goddamn clock was, much less a steel factory or a textile mill, right? And they simply did not obey by the dictates of Puritanism. They weren't Puritans either. They weren't good Yankees. So they just didn't work. And they didn't like working. And they rebelled in all sorts of ways, the kinds of ways that James Scott talks about, right? And the unions in the United States in the 19th century, including Eugene Debs's union, the great socialist leader, and you guys can look this up, they were Puritan to the bone. And they said the argument they made to the governments was, if you continue to work our people 10, 12, 14 hours a day, they will no longer want to work at all. And you will find a revolutionary, not revolutionary, simply rebellious working class who will not work at all. You've got to work these people less in order to make them work well. That's why we have shorter hours. That was the argument that was made. That was the argument
that, and we have a legally mandated 40-hour work week, just like in France, they have a legally mandated 35-hour work week. So
sure, but where did that come from?
That strikes. Well, I mean, I think that comes from political struggle that can't be reduced to culture. That you know.
Why do we? So why did it happen there and not here? Why do they have that culture and not here? Why do they have a 40-hour work week and not us? Is because they're capitalist nicer?
The 6.2% private sector unionization, and again, I think that the balance of power between labor and capital in society as a whole has a lot to do with it. Now, if you want to say that we wouldn't have that balance of power between labor and capital if not for facts about culture, maybe I think that even if you look at Canada, which is certainly very, 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 very far from any sort of socialist utopia, but I think is better in some of these social democratic respects. I think that's not very culturally different from the United States, but has certainly not from the part of the United States I'm from. I'll say that much. But has achieved some of these social democratic victories. So I think that even if you want to say that there is a feedback loop in both directions between culture and material conditions, that I think I'd be very skeptical of trying to tell a story about this that's all about culture. But if people want to see the best case for this, they should check out Thad's work. So what are the places that people should start if they want to read your stuff?
One-stop shop, Renegade History of the United States. I've got all the arguments I've laid out there and many more. And then Renegade University, I teach courses on this too, but go to the book, go to Renegade History of the United States to get the full arguments for what I've mentioned here.
All right, fair enough. And I think that this has been this has been fun, which I knew it would be, and we will do this again. So this is not.
No, Ben, it won't happen again unless you bring your cops.
Okay. All right. I will send the Revolutionary Police to your house and drag them there, and then drag you in front of a camera to have another of these conversations.
Now you understand socialism. I'm glad.
Yeah, no, that's
something. Yes.
Yeah, which I mean, somehow I managed to get you here the first time without it, so I'm actually optimistic that it might happen anyway. But thank you for this. I enjoyed it. We will, with or without cops being involved, we will do it again.
See you next time.
All right. See you then.
Bye.
Bye. All right, that was Thaddeus Russell, author of Renegade History of the United States. I am now joined by my friend Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks, from Jacobins Weekends show that she co-hosts with our friend Nando Vila. How are you doing today, Anna?
I'm doing well, Ben. How are you?
I am pretty good. So this is not the main thing that I want to talk to you about today, but I do have to ask. So you just had a chance to interview Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we interviewed him. We did a pre-tape. I think it was a day or two before the Capitol riots took place. So we didn't ask him about that, but I really enjoyed the interview. We got a full hour with him, which I think, is the appropriate amount of time to speak with Noam Chomsky. I had interviewed him last year or 2 years ago, I guess, now that I think about it, geez. And it was only for 20 minutes. And it's just, you can't get to everything you want to get to in 20 minutes. So it was fantastic. I highly recommend everyone check it out on Jacobin's YouTube page, youtube.com/JacobinMag.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Chomsky probably has a more impressive record of being right about things over the course of a longer period of time than just about anybody else that I can think of off the top of my head. Going back to the when he was first when he first stopped being just the most important linguist in the world and started doing the political things that he was doing during the Vietnam War. Happy to see Kale, producer from Jacobin, in the chat there. I think pushing back against some of what Thaddeus was saying in the interview, perhaps, but yeah. So Kale. You said, yeah.
Kale's the producer for the weekend show, and he's fantastic. He's just so great. He's such a great person to work with. So I'm really happy to see his comments.
Yeah. No, I always really enjoy Kale, but yeah. So you said you interviewed Chomsky before the Capitol riots, and so I do want to talk about this. So we kind of alluded to this a little bit at the very beginning of the show, but this is something, I guess I've been sort of struggling to find the right balance here between a couple of things, one of which is just acknowledging that, my crystal ball is certainly on the fritz. Like I definitely won't pretend to have seen this coming. I think this is a crazy escalation from what we've seen before, even though there was kind of a miniature version of it in Michigan over I think back in the spring, maybe that at the state capitol in Michigan. But even so, like it's something that is shocking. That like it's genuinely bizarre that this happened. That there was not just like a right-wing riot near the Capitol, which would have been certainly big news in itself, but that it happened in the Capitol. That there were people. Some of the reports that came out from it, that there were congressmen who were like breaking apart pieces of furniture, in case they needed to have clubs. So this is a deeply strange thing that happened, and a really disturbing thing that happened, and something we absolutely don't want to minimize, which is a mistake I think some people have made. But I think it's also important to not treat it as something that, like, I think the worst case scenario from what would happen on Wednesday was not that, like, democracy would have been overthrown and, we would have, I don't think there's any way that would have been the outcome, which I think might be an important thing to clarify because of some of what might be coming down the pike, in response to it. But I'm not sure I have all the answers here. Like I don't know exactly. And I think even looking at like the ways that people have been struggling to find the right language to describe, what happened, right? Is this a coup? Is it a riot? Is it something in between? Is it an insurrection, which is a word that you don't hear a lot, but as I've been hearing everywhere, for the last week, I think probably reflect people trying to find that balance. So where do you come down on all of that?
Well, I mean, I definitely think what happened is incredibly serious, and I have been turned off by some of the discourse that I've seen among, some more prominent figures on the left that I typically agree with on pretty much everything. But like this effort to kind of minimize it. And more importantly, I'm seeing some people even ridicule and criticize lawmakers like AOC, for instance, who shared with the country just how terrifying it was and how much she felt that her own life was at risk. And to be sure, I mean, you have photos of these right-wing zealots with, someone told me not to call them zip ties because it even minimizes what it is. But, those flexi cuffs, with the intention of holding members of Congress hostage. Like, let's not minimize it and understand that what happened was in fact serious. Also, I would just urge a little bit of consistency because for all of the rhetoric that I've seen and heard regarding failed coup attempts in Venezuela, and to be sure, they were failed coup attempts. This was also a failed attempt to essentially throw out a democratic process, a democratically elected, outcome. And I think that that's an issue. I think that the intentions of what they wanted to do matters. I agree with you that the probability or possibility of an actual successful coup is unlikely, but that doesn't change the fact that they were intending on essentially ensuring that someone who was not democratically elected, Donald Trump, serves another term, and who knows, maybe even serves indefinitely as president. And that's just beyond horrendous behavior that was egged on and encouraged not just by right-wing media, which is an issue, but it was encouraged, and now some new reporting indicates was even organized by Republican lawmakers. And that is a problem. That is a huge problem that should be dealt with appropriately. Now, on the other hand, though, I totally hear what you're saying about striking a balance, because the last thing we need is to, support any type of like hyperbolic rhetoric that can allow for lawmakers to beef up an already militarized security state to something even more egregious, right? Like, I don't think we need additional national security laws that focus on white supremacists. I think that would be disastrous. We clearly already have too many resources pumped into policing and the security state as it is. The real question here, though, is why is it that when it comes to certain protesters like Black Lives Matter, police departments will rain terror on the protesters, but when it comes to what happened last week with the Capitol Hill riots, seems like in a lot of cases, police just let it happen, right?
Yeah, I mean,
police, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because we're not even talking, I think, there were a lot of people at the original rally. I think there were tens of thousands of people, at the original rally at the White House, and a lot of those walked over to the Capitol. But I think the actual number of people inside the Capitol was, I've seen people say several hundred. I've seen people say maybe as much as a couple thousand. But there are probably as many Capitol cops as that, right? Like that's not like the actual. They should have been able to stop this. It shouldn't have been any problem to stop this. And I think that's probably the most objectively. I mean, maybe there will be other things that come out in terms of what you're talking about. The sort of role of Republican lawmakers, certainly in organizing the initial rally, maybe in some of the things that happen after that. But as far as the things that we know right now, I think the most objectively shocking part is that the Capitol cops let it happen, and I think we know that they. I mean, obviously there were people who are taking selfies with the mob that was coming into to the Capitol, and this is something they stop people from doing this all the time. Like this is a routine thing that they do. Like in 2007, there were anti-war Iraq veterans who were trying to go into the Capitol to protest, and you can see the pictures of of the cops like lining up like a couple deep to stop them from doing this. So I think that you can say, and this is actually important because of what you're talking about calls for new laws about domestic terrorism, that would be like, I mean, given how bad what we already have in the books are, I can't even imagine, what that would look like. And actually, I mean, it's funny, you mentioned people who have maybe, overdosed on a certain kind of online contrarianism, getting, mocking AOC for expressing that, people were afraid that that members of this mob would come in and kill them. But to her credit, I think Forrest, we have that tweet that she has struck, I think exactly the right note here. So this is people might not be able to see it on there, but in the quoted tweets from Norman Ornstein says the House must immediately pass a domestic terrorism statute with the focus on white supremacist terrorism, and send it to the Senate. And AOC in the tweet says, "I disagree. Our problem on Wednesday wasn't that there weren't enough laws, resources, or intelligence. We had them, and they were not used." So, I think, yeah. So this is the distinction, right? That you don't have to say we need to beef up the policing powers of the state. You could just say, why weren't these used in the normal way that they're used?
Exactly. I mean, when you really think about the fact that these right wingers had been planning this for weeks in plain sight on Parler. I mean, you don't even really need like highly trained national security intelligence experts to figure out what was going on. And I mean, sure, you might see those posts on Parler and think, are they serious? They're probably just, joking around, right? Giving them the benefit of the doubt, which I personally during the Trump era would not do. But nonetheless, like, just to be safe, let's prepare. And to be sure, we know now that the Pentagon reached out to Capitol Police and asked them if they needed additional assistance in the form of National Guards, to kind of beef up security on that day. And they, for some reason, decided to reject that. And so there was a real breakdown in the planning. And I think that it was an intentional breakdown. Obviously, I'm speculating, but I think we all have good reason to think that. And so there should be an investigation into why, first of all, this double standard exists, where, over the summer, we saw, mass protests throughout the country, and there was no shortage of policing or surveillance or security when it came to that. But when it came to these insurrectionists, these rioters, to see the Capitol Police take selfies with them was just discouraging, demoralizing. To see how emboldened these people were to just kind of like roam throughout the Capitol building without hiding their identities. I mean, they genuinely did not expect to suffer any consequences for this. They felt entitled to be there. They felt entitled not only to be there, but to vandalize property, steal mail from Nancy Pelosi's office, and then talk about it to the media. Exactly. And so I think that it's okay for the left to acknowledge that what happened was serious, while also, much like AOC, simultaneously rejecting efforts to beef up the security state more than it already is. Like, we don't need to do that. We can fight back and push back against those efforts. But I really genuinely think that messaging is important. And when people see the left, especially the online left, make fun of lawmakers for being afraid, minimize what actually took place, I really do think that it turns people off to potentially, being part of a broader coalition led by the left. So I'm just thinking about the bigger picture here, and someone who considers herself as part of the left, like, I was grossed out by a lot of what I saw online. So I would just say, like, there's no need to be hyperbolic. I'm not encouraging that, that's for sure. But I certainly do think that it's pretty destructive to the left to make it appear as if like anyone is minimizing it or thinking that this is nothing more than a joke.
Yeah. So I wonder, like, when people do that, right? They go beyond saying the thing that they should say, which is that this is not like the the level of threat that was posed by what happened isn't something that could only be prevented from happening again by passing a bunch of new laws and making it easier to spy on people and everything. That it would have been actually extremely easy, given what we already have, to stop it, which is part of what's scandalous about it. Whether you think that there was some, whatever the level of intention you think it is, like, and honestly, it seems like it could even just be that certainly a lot of rank and file Capitol cops, people were taking selfies, and maybe even some decision makers, turning down the National Guard, basically see MAGA protesters as their kind of people, so they're reluctant to crack down on them. Like that's all it could take, but that's enough, right? In context, that's enough to get it done. So that you could say, okay, like if you go beyond just making that point to saying, oh, no big deal, nothing to see here. I have seen, and I have seen some of those takes. There are people who I'm not going to name any names because this is somebody I even generally like, who said that this was like, this looked more, this was like a Black Friday, in Kentucky, or I think was the phrase they used, and it's like, no, we are talking about several hundred people, fighting with the Capitol Police at certain points, smashing their way into the Capitol. In at least one case, the famous picture of the guy with the zip ties, there seemed to be a clear intention to take hostages. This is really serious, and it's really bad. And I think however you come down in terms of the debates about, okay, what do you call it, or how should we think about this? I think everybody should be able to start with that baseline if it's really serious and it's really bad. But so I guess what I'm wondering and what I want your take on is what's going on with people who don't think that, because it seems like one thing that might be a bigger issue here is that right now, like a lot of the left is in this kind of weird place, because in 2016 and 2020, when Bernie ran for president, those two times, he's not going to run for president again. He'd have to have, there have to be like some amazing anti-aging breakthrough or something. So those two, which is part of the problem actually, but those 2 times he ran for president and everything that happened because he ran for president those 2 times, like the rise of DSA, the squad getting elected to Congress, all of that stuff, right? So all of that whole arc, from like 2016 to 2020, like built up the left, this kind of left that didn't really exist before then. But then now I think a lot of people are kind of panicking because Bernie lost the second time. It seems very likely there's not going to be a third time. Joe Biden is going to be president now. And so it seems like, I think there's this kind of rational core maybe where people are worried that like you're just going to get sort of sucked in to just regular liberalism, because that's going to be the only game in town that's sort of left at this point. And so I think maybe some of that contrarianism comes out of that people just want to say, okay, I want to really, really differentiate myself from just like regular shitty, MSNBC liberals, which fair enough. But it seems like, and this is not the only recent example of this, some of that's coming out in really unhelpful ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone sees it. And I think I love what Matt Christman has to say about some of the discourse that takes place on Twitter, for instance, because I think that he's correct in pointing out just like the competitive nature of the members of the left wanting to outdo one another, go further and further. I think I don't remember if it was him or someone else who even compared it to like watching pornography, for instance, right? You become desensitized to it, and then you need something a little more extreme each time. And I really like that analogy because I feel like there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of aimlessness right now among the left. It's leaderless at the moment. And so I think what happens is there's this like culture online where voices on the left are like trying to outdo one another and like really prove their leftist credentials. And it's just stupid. And I don't really like engaging in that kind of stuff, because what we really want to do more than anything is have thoughtful conversations about solutions. And that's really missing right now, because what we should be discussing on the left in response to the riots that took place is, okay, we have established what we don't want, which is the direction that liberals are going in with wanting, more of a police state. I don't want that. So what do we want to, hold people in positions of power accountable for egging this on or encouraging this? Those are the kinds of conversations we should be having, instead of like ridiculing AOC for genuinely being afraid for her life.
Yeah. And especially if we are worried that there is going to be like some like terrible new round of like war on terror in response to this, then the last thing that we should be doing is minimizing. I saw Ryan Grimm make this point that in response to something that that Michael Tracy said, I think actually on exactly what you're saying about the sort of mocking those concerns, that look, if you're worried that stuff's coming down the pike and you want to convince as many people as possible that it should be opposed, the last thing you want to do is give them the impression that people who are opposed to that just don't think that this stuff is serious, or are sort of mocking concerns about it, because that's going to be massively discrediting to any attempt to say no, we don't need and don't want any kind of new security laws.
Exactly. People lose credibility when they minimize what happened. And I think that's just not the right way to go about it. And again, like, pushing back against the police state makes all the sense in the world. I'm in favor of that. But the second half of that discussion is, okay, then what are the solutions, right? And so that was something that Nando and I were talking about and kind of debating during the latest episode of Weekends for Jacobin. And I've been thinking about it a lot ever since, because I want solutions. I don't want to just say this is really bad and then just kind of leave it at that. But I mean, dark money played a huge role in the organizing effort to get these people to DC. So we need to have a real discussion about, doing something, not just about money in politics, but like, how about we start with dark money? Because there are all these nefarious figures behind the scenes who have provided the resources necessary to get these people to the nation's capital. Why don't we discuss ways in which we can not only investigate Republican members of Congress who have allegedly played a role in organizing this, but like, we should hold them accountable, first of all, because as we've experienced over the last few decades, the Republican Party has become more and more ballsy with what they're willing to do in order to get what they want. And it's because they have gone unchecked. The Democratic Party is incredibly weak in holding them accountable. In fact, even after these riots took place, you have like Joe Biden saying like, I don't know, we really want to do this impeachment thing. Yeah. How about like anything that we can do to send a clear sign that this is not okay, not just for Trump, but The Intercept today. Ida Chavez and Ryan Grimm reported on this guy named Ali Alexander, who was like front and center of planning all of the stuff that took place. He outed 3 Republican lawmakers, and I want to name them by name because he said that they took an active role in organizing this. So Representatives Paul Gosar, Andy Biggs, and Mo Brooks. And it's not just like, organizing this Stop the Steal rally for Trump, but the effort in the Capitol building. Like, I don't know how true that is. This is an allegation by someone who was front and center with organizing it. He's saying that these Republican lawmakers are involved. So can we investigate that? Can we actually do a genuine investigation? And if they were really involved in organizing this and encouraging people to breach the Capitol building, well, 14th Amendment, Section 3. This is sedition. Like they know. It's not like they're stupid. These Republican lawmakers know that the Trump campaign failed in every single court battle They failed to provide a shred of evidence of widespread voter fraud, but they encouraged this anyway. They engaged in this anyway. In the case of Senator Josh Hawley, specifically for his own political career, and to pander to Trump's base because he's eyeing a 2024 presidential run. We live in a society that encourages us to engage in the worst behavior for personal benefits and personal profit. We see it in politics. We see it in the media, including left media, which grosses me out beyond words. And at the end of the day, like, we need to call that out, because while the incentives are there, while the, financial structures are in place to like push us in the wrong direction and do, basically misinform people or to engage in, these political stunts that actually damage the country. We just got to call it out and call it what it is. Otherwise, they're just going to continue getting ballsier and ballsier, not because they genuinely believe in what they're doing, but specifically because they see it as advantageous for their own careers and their own profits.
Yeah, right. Which is certainly, I think, the case in Hawley's case that he like this is something. Slight tangent. We're going to get back in a minute, but like this is something that drives me crazy. That I think even people who should know much better would give people like Josh Hawley credit for. It's like, oh, they're populists. They want to. They're just regular Reaganite Republicans with like better PR. Josh Hawley is against raising the minimum wage. He's against Medicare for all. He's against I'm pretty sure that if somebody actually asked him about it, he'd be against like laws against, sending little kids into working coal mines. He doesn't actually have any economic populist positions on absolutely anything, but he knows that he can mouth some of the right words sometimes. And certainly nobody in mainstream media is really that interested in pointing out, those contradictions. But since you did mention, and this is the other thing I wanted to get to, since you did mention left media and all of that, it is important, I think, to talk about this, that we've just kind of come out of, and the reason to this month-long ordeal for anybody who follows left media of people, what kind of at some points like really seemed to me like this unhinged hate fest against AOC, against Mark Pocan, and against anybody who defended any of those figures that was around, that was about their not being willing to sign on to this force the vote tactic. And the reason that I bring that up isn't that I particularly want to like rehash the like underlying merits of that particular tactic for the 10,000th time. I'd actually be pretty happy to never have to talk about that again. But if people want to know what I think, I wrote an article in Jacobin. If people want to know what you think, I think they can do a YouTube search Anna Kasparian and force the vote, and they can find out. And it's not even that, I necessarily want to talk badly about any particular person who might disagree, although God knows some of them deserve it. But I am interested in what this says about the state of the left right now, that could happen, that we could get this, like we could get weeks and weeks of so many people. And I understand that this is in a relatively limited sphere. We're really talking about the online
Thank
left.
God, by the way.
yeah, for sure. Online left and left media could be just totally consumed in this idea that like people were literally like circulating lists of, people who hadn't, who weren't supporting it. And what gets me about this is not so much whether you think that this particular like tactical idea makes sense or not. I don't, right? I've talked about that many times, but whatever. I mean, like if somebody says, look, I have this like really inside baseball wonky idea for this like parliamentary tactic, that the squad could use against Pelosi, and it doesn't make sense to me, then whatever. That's like a very minor disagreement among close allies about tactics. What gets me about this is that people were that ready that quickly to just completely write each other off about this, to say that anybody who wasn't taking, what they viewed as the right position on this like extremely minor tactical debate was a fucking sellout, to quote one of the main people, led this charge. And what's going on there? Like, how is it that we're at a point where this can happen, that it's like that easy to get people to just shred into each other about this?
Well, I mean, I think it's worth questioning what the true motivations were in the first place. I think that there are, and this is, by the way, this is totally outside of what the proposal was, what the strategy was. I think that having a thoughtful debate about it is great. But when I first saw this bubbling up on Twitter, for instance, my first statement was about the person who proposed it, not because I decided like, oh, I'm going to be petty about this and I'm like jealous that he proposed something and I did. No, it was because I have experience with this person and I don't trust that it was really about Medicare for all.
Well, if nothing else,
yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, Jimmy Dore, the person we're talking about, I said I didn't want to make it about people, but like everybody knows that much, right? They have is somebody, I think there are good reasons, and this is compatible with thinking that he's right. Like lots of people that I deeply respect, thought that he was right. Cornel West thought so. I love Cornel West, right? So
Same.
But I think in his case, you could still think that he's right and think this, but I think there are pretty good reasons to suspect that this is not just about how committed he was to Medicare for all. Among other things, the fact that he supported a candidate in the primary who did like pretty much the same thing that people like Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg did, and had this sort of triangulating like halfway in between Medicare for all and not, public option-y thing, and he did not say that Tulsi Gabbard was a fucking sellout for saying that. He kind of ran interference for her and said, well, I don't exactly agree, but there's some really good things about this. And it's very hard for me to wrap my mind around how he could take that position then and also think that people who are hardcore supporters of Medicare for all, who have made that the center of their politics for years, are terrible sellouts for not going along with his specific suggestion about how to do like a symbolic kind of theatrical stunt that would supposedly advance it.
Right. I think that it's worth being skeptical of people who spend the majority of their time delegitimizing and dividing the left. I think it's worth questioning what the motivations are. I think it's worth being skeptical about what the majority of, Jimmy Dore's content is dedicated to. I mean, it devolved to the point where now Humanist Report is somehow some sort of shill. I don't even know what that was about, but I don't really care. Humanist, by the way, Mike Figueredo is fantastic. Yeah. And I see these people. I see you. I see David Dole, Mike Figueredo, whoever. You guys are an important part of getting the word out about our ideas, what we can do to strategize. I mean, the idea of anyone else yelling and screaming about how the DSA owes them something, how the DSA needs to cater to them. I mean, it's just the most mind-boggling thing. And, one thing that I would also encourage people to do if they find themselves, on the receiving end of, Jimmy Dore's temper tantrums, when his supporters start attacking you and harassing you and spamming you, just click on their accounts and try to question what their political ideology really is, right? Because many of those accounts I clicked on were either sock puppet accounts or just full-blown Trump supporters. And I think it's important to build a broad coalition because I don't think that every single Trump supporter is a lost cause. I do think that there are people in this country who, are persuadable And so I'm not going to write them all off. But I do question the tactic of focusing all his energy on delegitimizing organizers, DSA, left-wing voices in the media. I mean, we're such a small group as it is. And it's so important for us to be open-minded with one another and have these debates. I like these debates. I think it's important to debate ideas because we're not always going to agree on strategy. But the mutual respect is important. And, the fact that he encouraged everything to just kind of devolve into accusations of being corporate shills and being funded by like NATO, which does NATO do that? Like, does NATO fund people? Like, it's just absurd stuff.
Not as far as I know, which is also, I remember at one point in this, that it was the big gotcha was that you'd interviewed Madeleine Albright when, so
that was, it was either 2 years. I went to the Munich Security Conference twice, which, by the way, YouTube wanted to have a presence there. So they had some of their top YouTube personalities go and do interviews, right? And so the idea, I wasn't hired by the Munich Security Conference to do it. There were journalists there. There was media there covering the conference, as there is with every other conference in the world. And YouTube wanted to have a presence. So they reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested. And so I did it 2 years in a row. And I have to say, the upper hand that I usually have in these kinds of interviews is people don't know who I am. They just don't. I mean, we're talking about politicians, world leaders. And I love that they don't know who I am, because typically they'll see me and they'll see a young woman and they'll underestimate me and think I don't know anything. And then I can ask them the questions that I want to ask.
Right.
Madeleine Albright, I don't know if it's to her credit, knew exactly who I was. And the second she saw me, she was super spicy. What are you going to ask me? That kind of confrontational tone. And I had been preparing for the interview, really looking forward to it, because I wanted to ask her about our relationship with Saudi Arabia and the double standards when it comes to human, just the excuse that we hear from the government regarding these interventionist wars and, it's a human rights crisis. And that's why we're doing it. But she threw me off because I just didn't expect it. And, I was so I think in the back of my mind, I just really wanted her to answer my questions. And so I started the interview. The opening line was, "It's an honor to speak with you." And I remember as I said it, I cringed, but it was just to kind of ease her into the interview so I could ask what I wanted and get an answer.
Yeah, which was stuff like that, the Saudi Arabia double standard and all of that, which I would think if NATO was paying you to do it, they would have given you better instructions about what to ask about.
Totally.
That would have benefited them less. And look, I do think that we can make a distinction, because obviously you're right that, all 71 million or whatever it was, people who voted for Trump the second time aren't lost causes. I mean, God, we better hope not, right? But that said, if somebody is currently a Trump supporter, then probably they are not yet in a place where they have the best interests of the Democratic Socialist left in mind. I mean, that just seems pretty obvious. And so, when you get these people, and it's not that it's a crime necessarily, even that to have people like that in your audience, but presumably the goal, right? If they are right, then what you would hope for is that you're winning them over. And what I guess disturbed me the most about that, all of it, and I know a lot of people are going to hear this as tone policing, but that's really seriously not the point. It's not about tone. It's not about how polite or rude you are when you're saying it. Is that who is the fight being picked with? Right? What's the actual fight that we're talking about? Because if you're picking a fight with Nancy Pelosi over Medicare for all, then,
have at it.
Have at it, please. Right. I love that. But even though there was a lot of talk about Nancy Pelosi because the theoretical, tactic that was being suggested, was about her. That's not actually who the fight was picked with, right? Nobody was even really like doing much of anything that was directed at Nancy Pelosi. You know, nobody was tweeting at Nancy Pelosi. Nobody was, you know, sitting in Nancy Pelosi's office. You know, like whatever. Like none of that stuff was happening. Instead, it was being directed at AOC. And of course, it's certainly true. Look, it's the point here is not that like AOC is infallible and there are no legitimate criticisms of her. Of course, I mean she's a politician. You know, there are legitimate criticisms. I've made some of them sometimes. I think there's lots of stuff that you could say about, you know, what's you know, like things that she should have done differently, all that stuff. And it's not even about like, sure, pressure politicians, every politician, even, you know, even the ones who are closest to you. But there is a more basic thing here, right? Which is when Dora was saying things like she's standing between you and healthcare. The point is not that it's rude. The point is not even that it's unfair to AOC. It certainly is, but that's not the point that I care about the most. The point that I care about the most is that it's just really weirdly counterproductive because like the reason that we don't have healthcare, what's standing between you and healthcare is the fact that we don't have about 200 more AOCs in Congress right now.
Totally.
So, yeah. Like,
yeah. You know, it was interesting because the messaging would change depending on what the feedback and critique was toward the strategy. At first it was, no, we know that this isn't, even if they bring it to the floor for a vote, we know it's not going to pass. But the point is to get these people, these lawmakers on the record, rejecting Medicare for all so we can primary them and hold them accountable. Now, you've already covered this. I've already covered this. As we know, it would have failed in the Senate, which actually provides quite a bit of cover for Democrats who aren't being sincere to vote in favor of it, while appearing to support it, when in reality, they know it's going to fail in the Senate. They have nothing to lose. But then the messaging would change to AOC is standing between you and your healthcare. But how does that make sense when you literally just acknowledged that it's not going to pass? You know it's not going to pass. And this is meant to be political theater,
right.
And also to hold Democratic lawmakers accountable. AOC is not the one standing between us and our healthcare. Our entire system of government and the corporate money that's injected into these congressional races, that's a huge problem. But, you know, it's not a sexy topic. It's not like some attention-grabbing, clickbaity topic to talk about. And like everything that went down. And by the way, like, again, I don't care about tone policing. I work for Cenk Uygur, and I get a little salty on the show too. I don't care about tone policing at all. I care about the substance of what's being said. I care about the unfair accusations that are being thrown in the direction of lawmakers that we have some influence over. And so when you start attacking them viciously like that, it's very easy for them to write you off. The last thing I want to do is push progressive lawmakers away from the left movement. Because we do need them. We need more of them, as you mentioned. And so I think that politics is about carrots and sticks, right? And so Jimmy Dore didn't use a stick. Jimmy Dore used like IEDs, and he tried to blow up the little power that progressive lawmakers have and the amount of like influence that we have over them. Because if you're associated with that type of demonizing and, you know, crazy hyperbolic rhetoric, it's easy for these lawmakers to write you off as people who aren't serious, who aren't credible. And that's the last thing that you would want, right? And then also, I'm sure you were frustrated with this as well. Just like this unwillingness to be honest about what the actual critiques were and the unwillingness to address the actual critiques, to use, you know, these straw man arguments.
Yeah, if you don't, you know, that everybody who's against it is just saying now is not the time to fight for Medicare for all, which nobody was saying. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, the issue, you know, is not so much like, oh, you know, he's being mean, you know, to this congresswoman. The issue is, like what's the strategy here? And it seems like if this did have more leverage, in fact, as you said earlier, I'm very comforted by the thought that this was largely limited to online and left media spaces, because if this did have a lot of purchase out in the wider world, if like most people who were who identified with a sort of Bernie-ish left agenda out in the wider world believed this, that the squad was the fraud squad, because they weren't going along with this, which was like a trending hashtag at one point in all of this, then the effect of that would be to tell like the people, the base of support of those politicians, that there's no reason to support them anymore, that it's actually, there's no reason to bother about getting excited about, or that it's just no longer important to support them against the Democratic establishment, because there just wasn't enough of a difference for that to matter. And that seems insanely counterproductive. That if you want, right now we have, the number of members of the squad can still, even after this election, be counted on your fingers. And even the number of people who are Medicare for All co-sponsors, and I do agree with Jimmy Dore that some of them are I'm sure some of them are very soft yes votes who would get cold feet if they thought that it was actually even going to pass the House. Never mind, like you said, make it to the Senate. I'm not sure why like exposing soft yes votes should actually be a priority right now, as opposed to dramatically expanding the number of those votes. And then also building the kind of movement that could effectively, like what you'd want is enough people who are like hardcore AOC types that you could get within spitting distance of actually passing it, and then build up enough of a grassroots movement that you could effectively pressure the soft yes votes to stick to their guns when it came to it. That would, be what would make sense to me anyway. But then like like the idea that you tell people this, that, oh, this is the fraud squad, there's really no important reason to support, Bernie crap politicians like this. Like that is a gift to Nancy Pelosi, because if people really buy it, right, if they really think that there's actually no difference between these politicians and the Democratic establishment, then why would you support them? Why would you support other primary challengers, who are going to be aligned with them, who are going to be similar to them? And that just seems like a really basic point. But then you think, why is it? And again, not talking about whether like the tactic was a good tactic or not. I don't think so. I don't think it was, but that's a debate that, again, I'm very happy to have that just as like a friendly debate, among people who basically agree with each other, but might have different ideas about tactics. But like the thing that gets me is that we're in a place, post Bernie, all that stuff, where you could have, sure, it's a small minority, I'm sure, of the base of these politicians. It's mostly concentrated online and left media spaces, but still, right? Like a lot of the most hardcore supporters of people who had been Bernie supporters, etc. Like a lot of the most hardcore group, people who are very online, who are willing to just orient everything totally around this for a month. And that seems like all I can think, and I want you to take out this, all I can think is that we just don't have like a big obvious thing to rally around right now. The way that the Bernie campaign was a big obvious thing for the left to rally around right now. So anything that seemed like, that felt like something that was big and dramatic that everybody could rally around, a lot of people were willing to do it. And in fact, like super hostile when anybody brought up any problems with it, because I think they were sort of relieved and happy to have something to rally around. So I guess the question is just, how are, like, I'm sure people will forget about Force the Vote. Like, I'm sure that like by 2 months from now, most people will like barely remember that this is the thing that exists, because that's how hashtag activism works. That, but like
right.
everybody has the memory of a goldfish about this. But So I guess I'm not worried about that, but I am worried that we're going to keep doing this because like we don't, the same problem isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think your analysis on that is right. I mean, I think and I don't begrudge well-meaning people who feel lost and angry and don't know where to direct their energy. To be sure, organizing is a difficult process that takes time. And so when you see so many people suffering during this pandemic, when you notice that there isn't like a robust effort by our lawmakers to provide health care to Americans during this time of crisis, yeah, it's infuriating. And what Force the Vote did was provide like this heated blanket on a super cold winter morning. Right. It was just comforting for some people. And I get that. And I don't begrudge them for wanting to kind of latch onto something, even if some of them, and I'm not talking about public figures here. I'm talking about, people who genuinely want these policies passed, right. Latching onto this and really, really refusing to listen to any critique of it. It is what it is. I'm not upset about that. But I do think that, I just think that there's like this lack of, we live in a society that has conditioned us to expect instant gratification. So I think that's an issue. People are just conditioned that way. And so they want quick solutions, but there are no shortcuts, especially when it comes to really changing this entire political system in a way that represents the best interests of workers as opposed to the elites. Look, you can call me whatever bad name you want. I mean, I've been doing this for 14 years. I've been called every bad name. I've been accused of all sorts of insane things. This isn't about me. But what was really horrifying to experience and witness was the insane cruelty toward organizers and members of the DSA. I mean, it is such a thankless job already to do what they're doing. And it's a difficult job to do what they're doing. It's an unpaid job to do what they're doing. But they do it anyway because they understand, based on historical events, the only way you get what you want is through this organizing, through these pressure campaigns. You're not going to get it done through boycotts or hashtag activism. None of that works. It's the people on the ground who are doing the hard work, right. And it can be demoralizing. And I really hope none of them were discouraged or became discouraged or demoralized based on the attacks that they had to deal with during that whole situation. I worried about them, honestly, because I want them to keep fighting. I want them to keep organizing. I want DSA's numbers to continue increasing. And not just DSA, anyone who's part of, this project, people who do not get validated, on a daily basis.
Yeah, National Nurses United, which have probably done more than any other single organization to advance Medicare for all, Justice Democrats, recruiting, primary challengers for Democrats who actually are against, Medicare for all, who are vulnerable to that, in districts where that's true, people who are involved in labor unions, who can help to that aren't necessarily, prioritizing Medicare for all right now, who can help make that happen. And I guess the thing that bothers me more about this than even like what individual person might think is the best way of organizing this kind of effort is the not seeing the distinction between what you're talking about, people who are doing that thankless job of organizing, and people who do what you and I and Jimmy Dore, and like everybody else who talks to a camera are doing, which is not to say that talking to a camera is worthless, that there's no benefit to that. It's just not the same thing. That there are what left media can do is provide political education and inspiration and, entertainment, certainly, right? Own that. And maybe even, ideological and strategic clarification, which are all good things. These are all things that the left needs, but they're different things than actual organizing and activism in the real world. There's like talking about politics is important and valuable for lots of reasons, but it's not the same thing as politics.
Totally agree. Absolutely. And I mean, just to give you, I can only speak personally about how people like Michael Brooks, I was not on the left. I mean, I didn't even realize how I wasn't on the left until I started watching Michael Brooks. And he educated me. I mean, he persuaded me in the best possible way to move to the left.
You do it by saying that you were a NATO shill and you were lying, you know, when you said you supported progressive causes.
Like Michael Brooks, I don't really know if people understand how much of a loss you know, Michael's death has been to the left, like, because he was just such a clear, incredibly intelligent communicator. And he had this way of making you realize you're wrong without feeling judged. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's not an easy thing to do. I don't think I've ever came across a single person who can communicate the way that he has. And I find myself going back to, you know, his show's archives and like rewatching things that had an impact on me, because I have to say some of the stuff that's been going on over the last month has, it's just been really hard. And it muddles your mind in certain ways. And it's important to stay focused, right? It's important to not get sucked in to this unnecessary drama, which, you know, has this sole intention of dividing us and making us even less powerful than we are already. So I really do turn to him even now for some guidance and some clarity. So I highly recommend you guys check out his archives. If you're not, you know, a patron to the Michael Brooks Show, you should be, because that's how you have access to all his archives. And he's just, I miss him every day. His voice is so desperately needed.
No, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I still, I don't know when I'm going to get to the point where I don't have that like itch to like text him about things that have happened, and to, you know, to get his take, which I couldn't predict, which is a good thing, you know, because that like oftentimes, you know, it would be surprising, but then I would think about it, and like a lot of times I would see his point. You know, there was like he had a political intuition that I definitely, you know, relied on while he was alive, and also just for that like kind of like just for the human effect of him just being funny about whatever was going on, you know, which he you know, which he was. I mean, like he was more. Yeah, like the on, like there's probably, I mean, obviously he was more uninhibited about, you know, certain people who annoyed him or whatever, you know, in off camera, but like other than that, right, you know, the gap between the on and off camera versions was just remarkably small there, you know, that like that he was exactly as funny and exactly as insightful, you know, in both contexts. But yeah, I think absolutely there are, like, I don't think anybody you know, can do quite what he did as a communicator, you know, for the left. Like, I know we talked about this shortly after he passed. There's a video from that you can find on YouTube from not very long before the pandemic started, and where he's speaking at Lafayette College, and he's talking to this room full of college students, and, you know, his initial presentation. I mean, it's actually kind of funny, you know, because he's like wearing, like, he has like the kind of, it's like almost like a tweed jacket or something on. He's leaning against the chalkboard. It's almost like the alternate timeline Michael, who became a college professor, but which I'm sure he would have killed at, you know, if he'd done. But I think those would have been really good student evaluations every semester.
Totally.
But he,
yeah,
you know,
no, I love, can I just comment on that real quick? Like, I just love the swagger. Like, he had this swagger during that talk. That's just like, I just love it. And he handled the most annoying questions masterfully. Like, I don't know if most people would have the kind of patience he did. And that's what I'm talking about. I mean, if you watch that video, if you watch that full talk, which I think is about like 3 hours long, but it's worth it. You'll notice exactly what I'm referring to, where he has this way of letting you know through like historical context and all of that, that you're wrong, right?
Yeah.
You don't feel like he's judging you or mocking you. You feel that he respects you and just wants to like open your mind to a different perspective. And Michael and I got close through Jimmy Dore, believe it or not, because I saw him making fun of Jimmy Dore and I was like, I kind of love this. And I like DM'd him one day and I was like, you totally get what's going on, because at that time, I don't think most people were privy to, you know, some of the issues surrounding Jimmy Dore, but like Sam Cedar and Michael Brooks got it. And so that's how we started talking. And then we started talking about political issues. And that was when he really started to open my mind up to leftist politics. And I'm so grateful for that, because it reinvigorated news and politics for me, because I started to see things from a different lens, a much more interesting lens. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had, I mean, I certainly, like in the talk itself at Lafayette, like the actual like initial presentation that he makes to the students, it's, you know, everything that was good about, you know, Michael's a communicator. It's funny. It's got that, I mean, it's got that, you know, Michael Brooks swagger, like, you know, like I mean, I always think of the time actually, you know, not that long before everything locked down, when he finally met my wife, you know, after years of my working with, you know, with Michael, and she made a comment to him about how every time I see Ben watching YouTube, it's either Bernie Sanders or you, and he was like, yeah, that's correct, that's what you should watch. You know, that's, yeah, like that's so just totally, you know, right. But
I love it.
So you get all of that, right? And also like very clear, like concise explanations. Like in that talk, he's like basically giving Adolf Reed's point about anti-essentialism in like 3 minutes in this way that's like for 19-year-olds who've never heard of any of this. And it's very clear, it's really compelling. And he just like then moves on to like making jokes about Brandon and stuff. But yeah, the part that I like the most about it is what you just said, that you know, students are asking him some, you know, look, I mean, like some of these are pretty annoying college Democrat kinds of questions. And it would be really easy to imagine somebody with Michael's politics responding to that by making fun of them, or, you know, just sort of like posturing for like whatever points it would get him from anybody in the audience who agreed with him, or anybody who'd be watching it on YouTube later. But he doesn't do any of that, right? Like he has like this, I mean, there's one moment when there's like just a little bit of that when somebody asked him like a weird question about whether he was like a self-hating Jew because of his position on Palestine, but that's like it. You know, other than that, he's giving these answers that are really smart answers, but they're also answers where you can tell it's really important to him that he can like make the case for his position in a way that they'll take seriously, that's going to connect to their worldview. So like it's going to mean something to them. And that's just something that he was doing all the time. And I mean, obviously the way that he could do that was really unique, but there is a more general thing here that everybody could, you know, try a lot harder to do, you know, to the best of all of our ability, you know, with how we interface with everybody who doesn't agree with us yet, because unfortunately, because that is most people, right? Like in like, you know, yeah, 71 million people voted for Donald Trump. You know, everybody else, several million people more, you know, voted for Joe Biden, which, given the choice, is the right thing to do. But it's also like, you know, Joe Biden won the Democratic primaries. You know, we lost that, right? And especially if you have political horizons that go beyond, you know, what Bernie Sanders is talking about, then you really need to think about how far we are from convincing most people, which isn't to say that you need to back down on anything. It isn't to say that you need to stop saying things that you think are true or making critiques you think are important, but it is maybe worth thinking, like, how is this going to register with anybody out there in the wider world who isn't already on board, which is like the overwhelming majority of the public is not on board yet with with what the socialist left is talking about.
Right. I mean, it really goes back to questioning what your objectives are. Are your objectives centered on this self-image of being like the top leftist, the most left on the left, or is your objective to persuade people to join us?
Right.
And so if you want to, show everyone that you're the most pure, then sure, go around like punching people in the face and pretending like you're holier than thou and the best. But I'm interested in persuading people to join us because we need numbers, we need people. And the power of persuasion is, part of it is validating the real concerns that people have, not judging them for having those concerns, and finding ways to provide leftist solutions to the concerns that they have. And I know people are doing that on the ground. I know the organizers are doing that, as we speak. And I think attacking them is the worst way to go about this. I think joining them, validating the work that they do, supporting the work that they do, amplifying the work that they do through our programming, I think is a better way to go about this. And also just being skeptical of people who seem to have some weird, vested interest in dividing us. Like I think that just that alone has been an issue over the last month. And I engaged in it and I regret engaging in it. And I've just kind of decided like, I'm going to log off because again, focus on what's important, focus on what matters. And just try to get people on board. That's really all we can do right now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And look, I'm sure there definitely were times in all of this when I got way angrier, at people than I should have. I don't have any doubt about it. Actually, like I think this is something that when I was talking to Thaddeus Russell before I interviewed him on the show, this is something I actually kind of realized in that conversation, because I told him, in passing. That I actually don't usually like get angry at like libertarians who I argue with. Like I just sort of think, yeah, of course they're wrong. I mean, that's just like a given, right? They're going to be wrong. I get angry at leftists, like that, because it's, because I guess my expectations are higher, because I see them as identified with me. So when I think that they're doing ridiculous things, I do get angry at that, which is counterproductive usually. Like it's way better, 99% of the time, it's better to either not engage with that stuff or if you do engage with it, force yourself to do it in a better way. But I'm definitely that's definitely a work in progress. That's which is something which is actually also a Michael Brooks thing. I mean, he would he would definitely tell he was super disciplined about not about what he engaged with and what he didn't engage with and how he did it. Right. He might be spicy over text messages or whatever, but when any kind of like public facing anything, even like replying to somebody on Twitter or something, he knew what he was doing there. Want to just ask, so there's a quick super chat question. It's not about, the setup isn't something about I'm familiar with. Maybe you are, but it's what do you think about Marianne Williamson's recent interview on Kyle and Crystal's podcast? And will you directly address the issue of the fractured relationship between socialism and spirituality? I do have stuff to say about the second part. I'm not familiar with the first part, but if you want to take the first crack at that.
Yeah. So, same. I actually am not familiar with the interview, so I can't comment on it unless I watch it. It's interesting because I identify as an atheist. But I will say that in recent years, I've been turned off by some of the treatment toward religious people, coming from atheists on the left. I don't really think it's helpful because at the end of the day, again, it goes back to what we've been talking about. We want to appeal to a broad coalition, and you can't do that if you demonize people of faith. I know there are lots of people in my personal life who believe in Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism. My best friend is Jewish. I don't follow these religions. I don't believe in these religions, but these are great people. And my mom, for instance, I grew up in a Christian household. My mom relies on her Christian religion for hope, for just to get through really, really difficult things in her life. And I would never want to take that away from her or from anyone else. The person who donated his kidney to my mom, my mom was on dialysis. It was like a disastrous situation. He donated his kidney to my mom, and he's religious himself and like one of the best people I know, like just so kind-hearted. I want people to join, our efforts. I want people like that to join our efforts, and I don't want them to feel judged in any way for what they believe. And I think it's important to differentiate, normal, like mainstream religious folk from, fundamentalists. Like fundamentalists are a problem, and we need to be clear about that. But I don't like the judgmental rhetoric toward religious people. I think you're muted, Ben, but I'm not sure.
I was. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, I'm an atheist, but also I'm not somebody who's interested in like trying as part of any kind of like political program to like convince anybody of that. This is actually something I've like struggled with a little bit, actually trying to find the right balance in expressing, because look, I'm also a philosophy nerd, so I enjoy arguing about things like that, and have done plenty of that in my life before I started doing what I do right now. But I've kind of held back, from saying that much about this since I have, for exactly the reason that you're saying, that we don't want, and I mean, this is something that, we never really got into it that much, but that I did, that I did slightly, disagree with Michael about, because he had, some spiritual interests that I didn't share, and that's, and whatever. I mean, like, I think in that particular relationship also, like, I didn't press it that much because it felt sort of hopelessly lame to, to make some of those points, interpersonally there. But yeah, I mean, I do, like, I think that even though I am an atheist and outside of political contexts, I am happy to argue with people about that, because, like, it's fun and it's interesting, and I'm curious about like what's actually objectively true about the universe. And certainly I want to live in a society where people have way more time and emotional energy to spend doing things like arguing about philosophy, rather than spending all their time worrying about how to pay for groceries and, health insurance. But I'm not, like, I've never really actually particularly been on board with the idea that, like the sort of certain kind of like old line socialist idea that, like, it's really important to disabuse people, religion is the opiate of the people, you need them to get, whatever. All I need from anybody politically is just pluralism. That's it. That like all, and actually the last chapter of Against the Web is very good on this. Like all, like, I don't care, like I care insofar as I'm interested in them as a human being, but, I mean, I don't care politically what anybody's metaphysical beliefs are. All I care is that they're not going to try to impose them on anybody else. Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. I think that's also key, right? Most of the problems I've had with religion really centered on the fact that, especially in America, like, religion is something that's cited to dictate the way you live your life. And it's like, right. But I don't believe in that religion. So why do I have to, abide by proposed laws and regulations, right. Regarding my own body based on what this right. religion believes. So that is a problem. But, aside from that, I mean, I love Liz Bruenig, for instance. Like, I think she's such a great person. And the last thing I'd want to do is demonize her because of her Catholic beliefs. Like, none of my business. That's her personal, religious belief. And as long as we're on the same, page when it comes to the policies that we need to make sure that people in this country live a life of dignity, then I'm all for it. Let's work together. Let's fight together.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like as long as you're not like, yeah, if your religious beliefs are inspiring you to try to outlaw abortion or make life harder for gay and trans people, then we have a problem. But if you want to live in an open, pluralistic society where people can believe whatever they want, and you have different beliefs than me, then we do not have a problem. That's totally, that's totally fine. And I think that I mean, God, it said earlier that one of the people I respect most in the world is Cornel West, and his political commitments are rooted in his reading of his Christian faith, but his reading of that faith doesn't tell him to go out and try to and try to persecute people who disagree, or to try to to try to make laws against reproductive choice. It tells him to go out and and help uplift the poor, the powerless. So yeah, that's if like I mean I have no issue with that whatsoever. I mean I have different views, but I mean whatever. Like I can like I said, I'm happy to to spend lots of time once we've sorted out the the healthcare and the housing and all of that stuff, sitting around talking about that stuff. But I'm not interested, and particularly I think that I'm not in like the idea that some people think that they have a lot in common with someone politically just because like they're both atheists or something, even if like that like, oh, I have more in common with some libertarian who doesn't believe in God than I have in common with Cornel West. Clearly not. I think like anybody who wants to have a decent society where everybody's material needs are met and people have more dignity and autonomy than they have under capitalism is somebody who is a collaborator, like is somebody who I see as being on my team, regardless of what they think about the origins of the universe or what happens after you die. But Ana Kasparian is most certainly on my team. Always really enjoy trying to talk these things through with you and getting your perspective. And I think that, yeah, there are people who should be around, like Michael, who are not, who we would, whose voices we're really missing right now, but yours is one that I'm really happy is out there, and I always really enjoy talking to you. And I promise that she's really seriously not getting paid by NATO to take it away. So thank you. Thank you so much, Ana.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. I love everything you're doing. Your show's fantastic. Forrest, I'm glad to see you. So keep up the good work and have a great night, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Bye, Ana.
All right. We are going to be joined in just a minute by Vic Viana. But first, especially because I actually need to get up for a minute, let's play a quick preview of a conversation that actually overlaps with one that I just had with Ana when we were talking about Josh Hawley. What we're talking about in this clip is very similar to that with Dasha from the Red Scare podcast. So as I said, the sort of reason for this interview had to do with that deplatforming on Twitter, and goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode about free speech and corporate tech censorship and all of that good stuff. But because she actually did once interview Steve Bannon, we also talked about that, and I just want to share that little clip with you guys. Again, for the full conversation, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgess. Where you can become a patron of the show. I think I saw something flying by the chat. Somebody didn't quite get the reference I made earlier to the cost of a milkshake at a 50s nostalgia diner in 1994.
I think they were being sarcastic.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was.
It's the plug. I think it's because it's the plug that every single episode.
Yeah. That's the one that I always use. Okay, I was about to be worried about their cinematic education there, but let's roll the clip.
Yeah, I mean, my concern was when Steve Bannon's War Room got deplatformed, that us having had him on Red Scare would implicate us in some way, but thus far haven't been faced any repercussions for it.
Yeah, and I guess the Bannon thing is part of what people are talking about. I listened to that one too, since I think when that happened, there's a lot of talk going around. I mean, whatever. If you're anybody who's on Twitter enough to not on Twitter enough to not know what I'm talking about, you're much better off, and
Yeah,
continue to go that way, right? But if you are, there was a lot of stuff going on about how okay, this proves it, right? That this
their mask off moment, they're platforming a fascist.
Yeah, exactly. Which platforming is also like a really weird word that's used in these discussions. That I think like it's one of these things that every once in a while it's good just as a check to think, okay, how would I explain what this even means to somebody who wasn't in this world, right? Like what platforming is supposed to be and why it's supposed to be bad. That you have somebody like. Because it's almost as if, right? Because I even saw it like with the Zizek Peterson thing. I saw like some people say, "Oh, Slavoj Zizek is platforming." Jordan Peterson. It's like it's like one of the best-selling authors in the world. And
by debating him in a public forum.
Yeah, that this Slovenian Marxist intellectual is like giving him his big break. By arguing with him, or similarly that like Steve Bannon, who'd been a special advisor in the White House, whatever his job was initially in the Trump administration, and who's like not a household name, but I mean anybody who's a political junkie certainly knows who he is.
Yeah.
That I mean. Whatever. I mean, there's lots of people listen to Red Scare, but I don't think that was I don't think a lot of people were finding out who Steve Bannon was for the first time by listening to Red Scare. And
if they were, I don't think they would have been radicalized by the conversation we had.
Yeah, right. In particular, I mean, what I liked about that conversation was that if you compare it to like, I remember around the same time I listened to, since whatever, I'm a strange nerd who will listen to stuff like this, that there was, I think like a year before, there was this Munk debate. So the Munk debates are this like this really high profile thing that happens in Toronto between Steve Bannon and David Frum, who's like a never Trump Republican. And in that debate, like all it was, right? If you haven't watched it, I'll save you the effort. All it was Bannon throwing a lot of vaguely populist rhetoric about Frum about working class deplorables, and Frum throwing a lot of rhetoric about Bannon about like Bannon being a fascist. That was the whole debate. I don't think there was ever actually any like specific like policy disagreements ever in the debate. Probably because they're both Republicans, so how much do they really disagree about? I don't know. But
exactly.
But then on the Red Scare debate, you and Anna, your co-host, kept asking Bannon this like really specific question, which is, "Hey, you say that you're a populist. Why don't you support Medicare for all?"
Yeah, that was. I'm glad that we asked him that, because he's sort of. I think I'm against deplatforming fascists, because I think if you do give them a platform, then they ultimately kind of will discredit themselves, or people should be free to draw their own conclusions from what they have to say, which in Bannon's case wasn't, anything very compelling.
Yeah, I think so, because in his response to that question, I mean, look, I listened to the whole thing, and it's I mean, I think I remember it pretty well, but I couldn't really tell you what his end of the day response.
Yeah, I
was.
can't even remember what he said. Yeah,
Because it seemed like he said a few different things and they didn't quite add up to an answer. And then he's like, "Oh, here are some more Republican friendly things we could do about healthcare." Yeah, but why not Medicare for all? I was like, I don't know, And then he never really got to like, okay, here's the bottom line reason that I don't support it. And I think what that really showed is that at the end of the day, like Bannon, he's a Republican with better marketing. Like he says deconstruct the regulatory state, and that sounds kind of radical, and depending on your position, maybe a little scary, and in a weird way, sort of like Foucault or something. But I don't know that he actually means that much that other Republicans don't mean by like deregulation.
yeah, he's similar to Jordan Peterson in that he's really into kind of like mythologizing and talking in these really grandiose kind of mythic metaphors. But ultimately he's pretty toothless. Like he doesn't actually stand for anything. He has his whole like fourth turning philosophy, and that's all very flimsy if you actually interrogate someone on it.
Yeah, it sounds like the whole fourth turning thing, it's like a little bit like there's like a certain kind of dweeby, extremely right-wing person whose like Twitter avatar is like some like Greek statue or something. It's like the prose version of that, that it's like that it sounds like really grandiose. It's like, oh, this is a guy, he must really know a lot about, history and this and that. But it's like, okay, so what does that mean? What's the upshot of that?
Yeah. It's like astrology, basically, at the end of the day.
Exactly, astrology. All right, so that's from the Patreon episode that's dropping on Thursday, which was a fun conversation. Even though I'm much more optimistic about the prospects for some kind of successful socialist political project than Dasha is at this point. I mean, I think we got pretty deep into this. I think she actually agrees with the left on pretty much everything, but she's less optimistic about what the prospects are for.
Well, she got famous for that video where she went against like the Infowars girl that basically she was like, "Honey, I just want everyone to have health care," when the girl was challenging her. And I don't even think people really knew that she had a podcast at that point. It was just kind of like a video that went viral. So I think she's always kind of been on the left, but maybe had criticisms of the left. Yeah,
I think she has some criticisms regarding like free speech and things like that. Although that stuff I agree with. I think the things that I maybe disagree with Dasha about are more just sort of level of cynicism or optimism about the prospects for the left post Bernie. I think, and I guess what really worries me about that is that there are people who've convinced themselves that because of like signaling, because like there's a certain kind of like salty Eastern European humor that like doesn't, that like reads in a different way to some people because of like who somebody is friends with, that like they've convinced themselves that these people, that Anna and Dasha are like bitter political enemies, when really they agree with us about like 97% of everything. And I think that doesn't mean that you shouldn't argue about the 3%, but I do worry about how insular a left subculture can get, that like even somebody who shares that many starting points, that you're that eager to just write them off as like secretly being fascists or something. Like I mentioned in the interview in that Red Scare episode, and by the way, I think we've lost Vic. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, he might just be refreshing it. He popped up and out.
Okay, all right. So yeah, in after the 2019 debate between Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Žižek, the Red Scare Girls had on Amber Lee Frost, who of course is was a guest on the show at the end of the year, but who's also somebody who some people like think of in this category, that like they're they're like, oh, they pretend to be leftists, but they're secretly fascists or something. And I remember in that debate, because it was Jordan Peterson, they talked about the trans pronouns issue, and they all agreed that, of course, it'd be super obnoxious not to call somebody by their preferred pronouns. What's wrong with you? And the death penalty somehow came up in that conversation. I don't even remember how it did. And they all said they were like really disturbed that that existed. And I remember thinking, man, they do not make fascists like they used to.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of that is also just being extremely online and kind of our ability to see kind of people as almost public figures when they have like a media platform. And you know what I mean? Like, people get to put all of their opinions out there, and we all kind of cancel each other for them online. But I don't think any of that really translates into the real world and into real like coalition building. If we were actually to come into power, I feel like a lot of it is just an expression of kind of a lack of power.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. That when you actually think that you're going to be able to achieve something together in the real world, you think that you can, like that Dasha video about the InfoWars girl, I just want healthcare. When you think that you're going to be able to get healthcare, when you think you're going to be able to get some civil rights victory or union, things, whatever, then your incentives are to try to find ways that you can work with people to achieve that, right? So like if there's somebody who like maybe seems like they might even have some bad views on some things, then you're still going to be like a little slow to write them off because you need them on your side. Whereas if nothing is at stake, like nothing is is at stake with a lot of this online and media stuff, unfortunately, right now, or it seems like, it's to a lot of people like nothing's at stake, that you've just accepted that you're going to be permanently powerless, then your incentive's the opposite. That's like, yeah, what do you have to gain from like giving somebody the benefit of the doubt or thinking it's like, okay, I don't like the way they expressed that, but like, do they really disagree with me that fundamentally? In fact, a lot of times your incentive structure at that point is to find reasons to write people off.
Yeah. And that's what's really been so depressing about like the post-Bernie era of being on the left, because, it seemed like we were all kind of working towards the same goal at one point. I mean, some people differed on it or kind of showed their teeth and embraced like, Warren's candidacy or something and kind of showed that they're not an ally necessarily. But for the most part, I mean, everybody on the left or that considers themselves on the left were working for a common goal for a little bit there. And it felt like we were kind of a cohesive movement. And now we do, like, everybody has these like media careers and political careers that it seems like they're incentivized to just cause conflict with other people with,
that gets, I mean, look, if you're in media, that gets clicks. Even if you're just like some guy with a Twitter account, that like you at least get, even if you don't get anything out of it financially, you at least get a sense of validation out of it, that that if you sort of get the ball rolling on denouncing somebody, then that's like a really good way to like get a lot of people to validate you really quickly. Get that little dopamine hit of, the 10,000 likes and retweets or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's no, I mean, this gets kind of down to some of what I was talking about with Anna before. Like, this is not in my interest to tell people to do, but like at a certain point, you just do have to log off.
Yeah, definitely. And I really don't think that, being extremely online is really helping anything right now. I mean, for the majority of us, like, and, we get trapped further and further into these insular groups, the more online we are. And it might actually help out if you're like working on a political campaign or you actually have goals that you're working to achieve and you're actually looking to reach some people. I mean, the majority of people aren't on Twitter or anything like that, but still, if you're not working for anything, you just kind of have these general values, you're pushed into finding people with similar values, and the less you actually have to, the less chance you have of actually achieving those goals, the more you're incentivized to kind of push people off that don't share all of those same goals.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. So we're now joined by Vic Viana, who very kindly agreed to step in this week since David Griscom is traveling, and since the show started, pretty much something that we've done is it's after a couple of hours of talking about music. It's always fun to end the show by pouring a drink and spending a few minutes talking to David about music. And part of the way that I got the idea for the segment in the first place is that it's something that that I used to enjoy, like in the out there in the actual world. After some nights of bar hopping and in Brooklyn, then I'd be back at Griscom's apartment, and he'd like pour us some whiskey, and he'd usually and he'd play me some country music that he was into, and tell me about it, and I wanted to share that with the world in general, or at least the audience of this show. And I do like and appreciate a lot of that music, and have grown to like and appreciate it a lot. I did even before that, but I've grown to, obviously Griscom, likes it more than, knows more about it than I do. And that's helped me appreciate a lot of it more. But of course, the kind of music that I often see you post about, Vic, is what I actually, on my own, mostly in my life, have spent a lot more time listening to. And so I thought this would be a fun chance, having you substitute here to talk a little bit about that, do a little rock music at the end of the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Yeah, I also am like only vaguely familiar with country, but yeah. Did you guys see this reminded me of like the photo that Griscom just posted on his Instagram. It totally is just him like sitting in the woods, like, with his hair, and he just looks like it's a country rock album. Sorry,
he's still in Oregon? He had like the cliffs behind him in that.
I'm not sure where he is geographically, or if they're driving or flying, but it does look like the Pacific Northwest a little bit more. But he's just it's him sitting near a waterfall.
No, he looks so majestic in that picture.
Yeah.
Totally.
No, absolutely. so yeah, this is a very very low pressure thing. Just thought this might be fun, because I think there have been like about 20 times in the past when I've seen you post about one or another of my favorite albums, and so yeah, so it can be good.
Right, chiming on some thread about Neil Young or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, the conversation we were having with Anna before, right when I hopped on the webcam, got me thinking kind of about, talking about religion. I was listening to Black Sabbath earlier today. It was like, what attracted me to this, like, when I was a teenager or whatever. And I actually, I went to Catholic high school, during the Bush years, and like, I think that, and there was like a cohort of guys that were kind of the band kids, and like we were into metal, and I think that like, it's funny because I think to a certain extent, like it's kind of passe now, or like kind of just seen as goofy and campy. But I think if you're coming from that background, like it still is seems a little rebellious, So yeah, I mean, I think that conversation just got me thinking about that,
which is actually funny
too. That like. No, sorry, you got it. I didn't really have a full train of thought.
Yeah, which is funny that you mentioned that, because actually earlier today I was I don't go anywhere now really, because I obviously the pandemic, and my whole life is on the computer, between the show and other things. So I pretty much, leave the, I pretty much go outside to either take the dog on walks or, do curbside pickup, grocery orders. But but I was doing the second thing today. I was going out to pick up a grocery order, and actually a fairly recent Black Sabbath song from like the reunion album they did came on the radio, which was the one called "God Is Dead." So that's definitely. In fact, I saw Black Sabbath in I'm trying to think. This would have been 2013. So it was while they were doing the reunion tour with Ozzy. And that was definitely saw them in South Florida, Pompano Beach, and it was, and that was definitely part of the shtick. Then, like, they had they had the screen up with like different images that they were playing during the concert, and one of the images I remember was of like a little clip from the 70s. Do we lose? Okay.
I think he's just refreshing again. Yeah,
Oh.
back.
There we go. Yeah,
it froze for a second. You're describing the concert.
Yeah,
And then it
yeah.
totally
So
froze on my end.
yeah, at this Black Sabbath concert 2013, I remember like one of the images they were projecting up there was from the 70s, I guess, and it was evangelical protesters and like the sort of short sleeve dress shirt and tie, like holding up signs saying
Right.
Black Sabbath exalts Satan.
That's so funny. That's great. I mean, it's funny too, because that's like looking at that now, it's like, oh man, it used to be at the conservatives of the PC police people, in a certain respect. But yeah, I mean, they're great. Did you hear recently? Actually, Ozzy, it came on my Spotify a couple days ago. But Ozzy did a song with Post Malone. It's actually pretty great. It's like
I
just
have,
Ozzy in a modern setting. Kind of.
all right. The audio is breaking up a lot, but you were asking about this is unfortunate. If we can't make this work, because I really want to have this conversation. So if we can't make this work, then we'll do it. We'll do it next week, and postpone the next Outlaws and Revolutionaries for a week so we can do it. But you were asking about the Post Malone thing, and I have not heard that actually. That's a good reminder. I remember hearing that existed. But it is funny, like the way. Okay, I couldn't make that out.
I would say it's worth checking.
Okay, all right, Vic. Let's. We're gonna have to do a take two at a later debate, because later debate. I'm kind of hearing some like you're coming through well for 2 or 3 sentences, and then it's kind of staticky. Although your video also got a lot better, so maybe the internet's although you're also frozen. So okay. All right.
We'll call it.
Okay. All right. Sorry, guys. I think the internet has defeated us here for this segment. But we will for sure do this, even if we have to find some way of recording it. Of doing a pre-record if where Vic is going to be next Monday, isn't going to be good either. Somebody in chat says, "Lol, Vic sounds like Iron Man." So.
Oh, it seems like he dropped
Okay,
back.
yeah, it seemed like he was coming back there for a second, but I think he is. I think he is gone again. But this is clearly possible. Vic was on our election live stream last year, so I believe that he has access to good internet connection.
We went on Katie's StreamYard like a couple weeks ago, me and him, and it seemed to work out.
Okay, so yeah, something is just on the fritz tonight. So this is not a long-term problem. We can do this. We can do this next Monday. But in any case, I am looking forward to doing it whenever we are able to do it, because Vic is always fun to talk to, whether it's about politics or anything else.
I was
And-
hoping to talk to him about our populism. Like I was hoping that he would do a plug for our populism doc that dropped a couple weeks ago.
No, we played that on the live stream. That was really good. So yeah, if people aren't familiar with Vic's other work, he was also the main video maker for those illicit history documentaries on the Michael Brooks show, like some of which are crazy good. Like I love the one about Michael Manley and the sort of triumph of drug gangs over socialism in Jamaica. Like I always remember thinking that like that's something that you could show to somebody who's like your, I don't know, like not super political brother-in-law who likes gangster movies. Like you could show that guy that Jamaica illicit history doc.
That was the first one that I got to find any video for. I mean, not a lot of it, but the way that we were doing them first was that Vic would do the video and I would do the audio, like cut it, and then I would send it to him. And that was like the first one that I got to like find any video for, I'm pretty sure. So I was really proud to have helped out with that one.
No, absolutely.
But Vic's amazing. He does really good work on these, and he on the illicit histories and on now the Jacobin docs that we've been doing. And I feel really honored to have to get to work with him as much as I do.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan. So yeah, he does really good. He does really good video work. Yeah, I know. Michael was like really proud of those illicit histories, and he's always an interesting guy. He's always fun to talk to, and he is constantly posting good stuff about music. So
yeah.
So next Monday for sure, we're gonna have that conversation, and I am really looking forward to it. For the moment, though, unless there are any last minute super chat questions that people want us to get to before we drop off, we're probably going to cut it in just a minute for tonight. Before we do that, I want to talk about a little bit of stuff of what's coming up over the course of the next week or so. So next week, the next regular Monday night episode, the guest is going to be Michael Albert, who is, along with Robin Hanhel, he's one of the two main theorists of participatory economics. And so in terms of one of the things I touched on with Thaddeus Russell, this about writing the recipes for the cook shops of the future, trying to figure out, how socialism could work. I think he has really interesting things to say about that. And it's not a question, but I'll read it anyway. Joe Broomer on Super Chat says, Forrest Mustache is the only reason I watch your show. So, fair enough. Can't argue with that.
It's the one they send you. You start working as a super producer, and they send you your mustache union card.
Yeah, that's right.
Right to your front door.
You think Matt Leck just had that mustache naturally? Come on. So good talk to Michael Albert. Should be able to do like a pretty deep dive about Paracon and anarchism, and he is. I don't agree with him about everything, but he has a lot of interesting things to say. I think he's one of the most thoughtful, thinkers on the far left. And the week after that is going to be a panel, on the assumption that we don't get an actual coup in between now and then. So Joe Biden is going to be president by 2 weeks from now. So I thought a good way to start that era would be with a panel on Biden and American Empire with Katie Halper, Daniel Bessner, and Rania Khalek. So that's going to be 2 weeks from now. Michael Albert's going to be next week. There is, remember, lots of good stuff going on the the YouTube channel between episodes. So there are regular Wednesday movie live streams where we talk about movies, often with different guests. So the one always me and Forrest, sometimes various guests. The one this week is going to be about Raging Bull, continuing our Martin Scorsese series. So if you want to watch Raging Bull and then watch us talk about it and ask some questions, that's on Wednesday. Might start actually having watching some of these movies with patrons on the Discord. Still trying to figure out how that might work.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah,
especially if we start doing like other ones besides just the Scorsese ones, which are longer movies, and finding time to do that is
I think 90 minutes movies are probably better for the Discord watching. And also, I should say there is a super chat question, but before we get to that, the other sort of standing live stream series that we've been doing every week is the Sunday night debate series. So we watch often much older, not always, debates that are available on YouTube. Like we've watched James Baldwin versus William F. Buckley, and this yesterday we watched Christopher Hitchens versus George Galloway. So the one this week, I'm going to be joined by Russell Sabriglia and Conrad Hamilton. We're going to watch Slavoj Žižek's debate with Graham Harman. So that's much more of an esoteric kind of philosophical debate, but I think it should be fun. And I think those two guys, Conrad and Russ, should do a good job of helping me, break down what's being said and make it accessible and kind of hone in on what's interesting about what Zizek and Harman are arguing about.
It was really funny to be part of that. Well, like not as much part of it as just kind of eavesdropping in, but the Cornel West Zizek panel that Russell did for TMBS. It was really funny to watch them just talk over him and totally like his contributions to it. But
yeah, I felt bad for Russell when I was when I was listening to that. I listened to it in podcast form since I think, as allegedly the moderator, I think he got to ask like 3 questions in an hour because Cornel, Zizek is obviously doing the Zizek thing and going from subject to subject and making associations and Cornel West is riffing off of that and bouncing off his energy the way that he does. And those are probably like the 2 biggest personalities you could possibly get for something like that. So, I mean, as a moderator, I don't know what there is to do except for just kind of stand outside and let it happen.
And they even plug each other's books at like different parts of it. I don't know. It was at the end of it, I popped up, and then it's not in like the one that we released because we were doing it in like speaker view and gallery view, and you can hear Cornel West go, "Brother Forrest" in the back.
Yeah, I remember. I remember telling. I don't even remember whether this was on air. I think it might have been before the episode started. But back one of the times I was on TMBS in studio before it was. During the Bernie campaign, and there was a panel in South Carolina where Cornel West had referred to Bernie as this magnificent vanilla brother, Bernie Sanders, and I remember telling Michael that one of my main goals in life was to have Cornel West refer to me at least once as a magnificent vanilla brother, But yeah, no, that was amazing. Like that's like something that, like, if you listen to that conversation, Cornel West and Slavoj Žižek, that like almost ruins you for listening to podcasts because what's going to top that?
I forget who said it. Also, there was like someone was saying like the 2 versions of Cornel West saying brother. He said like magnificent vanilla brother Bernie, and then there was the other one that he's like brother Biden, but like he said it in like a really
yeah. Well, the best example of this when Michael was interviewing Cornel West and and West actually brought up Against the Web, which I think he just read that on his own. I don't think that Michael actually told him about it.
Yeah.
And he was praising it, right? In fact, I think he said it was a magnificent text, but he also, like, there was a point in the conversation when he said, when he was like, well, I mean, it's also like, I really want to see what you do next. Because, it's these guys, these intellectual dark web people, you're criticizing. What did he, his exact phrase was, so he's talking about the intellectual dark web, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Sam Harris. And he said, and I remember thinking this hilarious at the time, I remember texting Michael about it, because like, this is, I think, the most personally insulting I've ever heard Cornel West be about anybody. What he said was, well, these aren't the most profound brothers.
Yeah.
which is exactly right. They are not the most profound brothers. But
No.
Observer, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, you ever going to do something about Marta Haneker and decentralized participatory planning? So I think this is a variation on the same kind of idea of Paracom participatory economics that I'm going to be talking about with Michael Albert next week. So I'm not super familiar with Haneker's variation on it. It's certainly something I'll look into. I mean, it's something that obviously I am interested in different proposals that have been made about how, socialist economy might work. As I said, I'm working on that book with Bhaskar and Mike Beggs, where we're trying to, put one of those forward. And so I'm definitely.
Is that your first official announcement of it?
Well, it's actually Bhaskar spilled the beans in late 2020. I don't even remember. He was doing a Jacobin, I think they were still called Stay at Home at that point, about social democracy, and he mentioned it in there. And I remember thinking, it's like, oh wow, I didn't know that was public yet. Okay, but
he's got that power. He's the one that can.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, look, I mean, I'm obvious. So obviously, I'm interested in this stuff. So I will check out, Marta Haneker. I mean, I guess I would just say more generally that, to me, the reason to try to develop and think through these specific proposals about how a post-capitalist economy could work aren't so much that I really believe that anybody in, like, the 22nd century is going to be like really basing their policy decisions, in the, Workers' Republic of the future on, what me and Bhaskar said in 2021, that it's like, oh no, we really need to find out what these like, oh yeah, so that was a specific recommendation for a book by Marta Haneker. So it's called Planning from Below, available from Monthly Review Press.
It's two $5 super chats. Now you have to read it.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I don't know. Is the book more than $10? Probably, but no, I actually will read that. I am interested in finding out, what her version is of it. But again, I think the reason to do this, the reason to, like that phrase from Marx I was talking about with Thaddeus Russell about the recipes for the cook shops of the future. And I understand like why like Marx was hesitant to do that, right? Like, because I think there's a core of it that comes from his deep democratic commitments, that it's like, look, obviously this is something that people are going to have to actually figure out in a context that is not our context, and facing challenges and problems that we're not going to be able to just sort of like anticipate and dream up answers to from the perspective of 2021. And I think that's all totally right. So the reason I think that it's valuable to do that work of trying to lay out the sorts of blueprints for what a socialist society could look like is not so much that I think that people, like workers in the future post-capitalist society are going to be slavishly like, come in like copying the details of what, me and Bhaskar and Mike Beggs say, or what Marta Haneker might say in that book from Monthly Review Press, or what Michael Albert says, or, Robin Hanhel or Eric Olin Wright, who wrote about this stuff. It's more that even if what you come up with isn't necessarily exactly what's implemented, I think that it's still important to lay it out, because right now, one of our big problems is what Mark Fisher called capitalist realism, which isn't the same thing as like celebrating the status quo, thinking the status quo is awesome. It's just thinking that the status quo is all that there is, all that there ever is going to be. You know, that there's no that, as Margaret Thatcher said, that there is no alternative.
Yeah.
And so I think even with a lot of people who, I mean, this honestly, like this takes us back, not that we're going to dwell here, but this takes us back to Force the Vote, because I think that like one of my big points in that debate was that the reason that I think, right, some people think the reason that Medicare for All polls so well, but voters aren't punishing politicians who oppose it. And some people think the reason for that is that they don't know that those politicians are opposing. And I'm sure that's true in some cases, but I don't think that's the main problem. I think the main problem is not that people don't know that politicians are opposed to it. I think the problem is that you don't get mad about something not happening until you believe that it might happen.
Yeah, completely. And that's kind of that Ronan Burtonshaw quote that Griscom likes to use, and that, you know, I've kind of taken up using. That he says, you know, our main challenge is convincing people that, you know, that these things are options and that politics can help change their lives.
No, that's exactly it. Like, I think the problem with the population at large is not having that belief that politics can change their life. It's that sort of deep way that capitalist realism infiltrates into our souls, that people think that that anything that sounds like a big departure, even if it's like a very mild social democratic measure like Medicare for All, or, you know, which, I mean, again, I understand it would be huge in the context of the U.S. right now, but like certainly by global standards, a very mild social democratic measure. Yeah. Even something like that, I think most people think, well, that sounds like a big break from the status quo, so they don't believe it's going to happen. They think, yeah, that sounds like something politicians might talk about, but, you know, it'll never happen. Like their whole experience of life is that big reforms that solve their problems never actually happen through politics. And so I think our problem with the general population is, sure, people might, you know, when a pollster calls somebody up and says, how would you feel about Medicare for All? Most normal people who aren't right-wing ideologues are going to say, yeah, I love it. But that's very different from taking it seriously enough as a possibility to get angry that it's not happening. We had giant protests and riots over the summer after the murder of George Floyd, because I think a lot of people think that, yeah, come on, it's 2020 at that point, like we're in the 21st century. It should be possible to have like policing where shit like this doesn't happen all the time. They take that seriously, but we don't have big protests and riots over Medicare for All, because I think most people who support it, who like the idea, don't take seriously that's going to happen. So I think you need to rebuild that confidence that mass politics can actually change the world. And then I think when it comes to socialism, that you have a sort of second level version of that problem, even among the hardcore. My cat has a lot to say tonight. So
I was trying to check if it was on your end or my end. There was a cat for a second. I was like,
yeah, exactly. But like, even among people who are pretty hardcore, like even among people who like everything that Bernie said, you know, like, you know, what AOC says, you know, who are at least, let's say, socialism curious, that even most people like that, like, don't really take seriously the idea that we could ever get beyond capitalism entirely, because it just sounds so distant from anything that they can imagine, because they came up in a post-Cold War world where the idea that, you know, it was just so ingrained that capitalism is basically the only game in town. So even people who take seriously the idea that we could have Medicare for All, that we could maybe turn the U.S. into Norway, certainly don't have any horizons for anything that goes beyond Norway.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's worthwhile to work on these blueprints, because I think you need to at least be able to give people an idea that they could imagine actually happening of what a post-capitalist society would be like, for them to take that goal seriously enough to fight for it.
Yeah. And there's also something with, I mean, using the George Floyd protests, you know, as an example, or police protests in general. I mean, every town and every city has police, you know what I mean? Like, you probably know them to some extent. Like, unless you're in a huge city like, you know, New York or something, like you at least probably know people who know the police in your town or your city. And a lot of times they're like more local people, and it's something that you feel like you can change. Whereas national politics, like it's not as empowering. Like, you know, it's not as empowering to fight for something. Like you can rage against politicians on a national scale, but you probably don't feel like you have any sway over that. But at the same time, you know, there's going to, you know, it's not going to be like, let's say capitalism did get overthrown in the next year or something. I mean, I don't think that that's likely. I think most likely we're going to transition to something that, you know, it's going to be a transition over time. But, you know, at the end of that, everyone's going to be standing, looking at each other and going, you know, what now? And it's going to end up being a coalition of a lot of different groups. So having a blueprint, you know, having blueprints that people have worked on a lot over time definitely, you know, seems like something that is incredibly useful at that point.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, that you need to have, in fact, I think that was actually a problem after the Russian Revolution, you know, that people hadn't, like, that all of the sort of effort and thought and debate, you know, that had gone on with, you know, Bolsheviks and Mensheviks and social revolutionaries into thinking about how you could make a revolution come about, right? Like, I think remarkably little had gone into to what you do afterwards. And so I think that some of these like big oscillations from the initial policy of, you know, of what was called war communism to, you know, the sort of economic liberalization that happened with the new economic policy to then, of course, you know, what happened later. But I mean, I think a lot of that is that people are, you know, making it up as they go along, which, to be clear, I think a certain amount of that is inevitable. That, like, I don't think that you can anticipate everything, you know, far in advance. And I'm sure that people will have concerns, be facing problems that, you know, that you just have to be at that moment, you know, to see. But that said, I at least want people in that position to be able to draw on like a big reservoir of people trying to think hard about and debate and look at least what the possibilities are, you know, so they're not, you know, so they at least, you know, whether people end up agreeing, you know, with me or with somebody else or whatever, you know, so like at least they have something to draw on, like, and that's why even in terms of immediate social democratic stuff, I think it's really useful that like, that's why I like, you know, that Matt Brunig, you know, does that People's Policy Project, that like it's incredibly useful to have people working out like policy details, even for social democratic ideas that like we just don't have, you know, the votes. We don't have enough people in power to carry out, because once you get there, it's good to have something like, hey, here's what we can do. You know, it's that you can, like the same way that like ghoulish right-wing lobbying organizations, you know, come up with policies that lawmakers can just cut and paste. And,
like ALEC and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally right. And then also just because people have that, just because I think it can again be useful to show that we're not just sort of yelling. We're not just sort of yelling about things that we don't like. Not that yelling about things that you don't like is not legitimate, you know, but that we actually do have well worked out ideas about what could happen. I think that especially at a time when you're facing this kind of multi-level crisis of confidence about a left project, that, you know, that whether you know, whether we could ever actually achieve some of these things, you know, whether we could achieve even like basic social democratic measures, whether we could go beyond social democracy and, you know, have a post-capitalist society, that, you know, that when a lot of people, you know, like you need that, you know, like even I think to have a successful socialist movement, obviously the most important thing is to energize like the huge mass of the population that, you know, that you need to get on your side. But you also do need the hardcore of people who have like a real long-term vision, you know, that they're willing to stay in it in the long haul, because it's not just sort of immediate, what can happen this year, what can happen next year.
And I think that Bhaskar has done a lot of good work on like the Meitner plan, like talking through that as like a social democratic moment in Sweden. He did the, you know, I mean, he's written about it. He's done the you know, Jacobin talk about it and stuff like that. And I think that comes from the kind of the same place, him realizing that you know, if we are going to go beyond social democracy, like there are kind of already put through frameworks and plans to do that. And you know, it's never about copying it exactly as, you know, I mean, as a cut and dry blueprint, but thinking through these things is going to be a very important part of things. And it's kind of been a parable almost for as long as socialism and these ideas have been around, that it's easy to, not easy, but you know, it's one thing to call for a revolution. It's one thing to kind of have a critique and a framework around all these things. And then when the moment comes, you know, if you're unprepared for it, there's a lot of there's a big chance that, you know, you're just going to get swept up into something different. And that's kind of happened with protest movements a lot. There's always kind of a right wing of it and a left wing of it protesting, you know, an unfair system. And if you don't have a framework in place or a blueprint in place, everybody just kind of gets swept along with the nationalist or the right wing framing of it. And you don't want to, you know, give that up, like give up the vision of the future.
Yeah, so Observer, thank you for the super chat. Says another great book is a recent reprint of E.P. Thompson's anthology about self-organized youth work brigades accomplishing titanic construction projects in post-war Yugoslavia, the railroad. Yeah, I think actually, I think the history of the Yugoslav version of communism is really interesting. Actually, I know Bhaskar has been reading a lot about that to talk about it in part of the book that he's writing. So maybe can come on sometime to talk about that, or you know, we could even have a panel on that. I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people know about the Soviet experience, but you know what existed in Yugoslavia. I mean, it had its own set of problems, but I mean it's their different problems, and I think that's something that's I think that it's worth putting some stuff out about at some point. But meanwhile, I should just say again, if you want that interview with Dasha, the one we did last week with Gene Bajalan about Kurdistan, and every other Thursday patron bonus episode, then head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Ben Burgess, $5 a month to join that. And you get lots of good stuff for it, you know, as an expression of gratitude. You know, you get those bonus episodes, you get the Discord, you get those Discord office hours group voice chats, and there's more stuff coming down the pike in the future that, you know, that we've talked about doing. But of course, the main reason to do it is just that if you like the work that we're doing here and you want to support it, then this is one of the best ways to do that. If all joking about the milkshake and Pulp Fiction aside, if you cannot swing that, which I certainly understand, I have been there, then you know, not that many years ago, actually, I've been there. So if you are in that position, you know, you can still rate and review wherever you get podcasts. You can still like and subscribe on YouTube. Those things do help.
Hit that bell.
Yeah, no question. And while you're here on YouTube, you can get those Wednesday movie live streams and Sunday debate live streams. So lots of good stuff coming up. I'm really excited about all of it.
We've really hit the ground running already in 2021.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think between this and the Wolf episode, I think we've been off to a really strong start. So I've been excited about the everything that's been going on with the show and everything that's coming up, which is a lot of it, right? You know, if you can see the Google Doc where we've got all the like upcoming stuff, on it as it's been coming up. So I really appreciate everybody who is has been supporting it, and everybody. Somebody says in chat the cat is going to have words with Ben when this is done. I think he's already having words with me, but yeah, I've been really excited about the way that that this show has been growing. I've been really excited about the guests that we have coming up, the discussions that we're going to have coming up. And yeah, really appreciate everybody who came along and watched the episode, asked questions, just participated in it. I think the audience interaction is one of the very best things about doing this on YouTube. So I will see everybody next week. Left is best.